Tonight, you're not just going to fall asleep. You're going to drift through the history of one of the most mysterious families in the entire wizarding world. A name spoken in fear, in admiration, and eventually, in redemption. This is not the story of Harry Potter. This is the story of the boy he rivaled, and the family that raised him. Before the war. Before Hogwarts. Before the sneer and the silver cane. There was a line of Malfoys, spanning centuries, sealed in manor halls, bound by pride, and haunted by legacy. And tonight, we're going to walk their path, together. From Armand Malfoy and the Norman Conquest, to secret dealings with kings and queens, to forbidden wings of the manor itself, and all the way to a single mother's lie that saved the wizarding world. But before we pass through the Silver Gate, just a small riddle for you, one only the most clever witches and wizards might remember. What object made Draco the secret master of the Elder Wand, without him even realizing it? If you know, leave your answer in the comments. We'll reveal it later in the story. No house points awarded tonight, just sleepy bragging rights. And if you've ever fallen asleep to one of our stories before, you might already be one of us, part of our quiet little circle of bedtime listeners. If that's you, tap the like button, and let us know you're out there, somewhere between the blankets and the stars. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you can. Only if you want to wake up to a fresh story next time. No pressure. Just a soft nudge, like a house elf setting down your slippers. Slightly warmer tone, inviting. Now, a few quiet words before we begin. This story you're about to hear, it's not made up. It's crafted from canon. Pulled from the books, the notes, the lore. Even from the silences between the lines. This isn't fan fiction. This is historical reconstruction. The Malfoy family's rise, their fall, their reckoning. You've read the main story. This is the one between the shadows. So take a breath. Settle in. Let the dark curtains of the manor close gently around you. And as your eyes grow heavy, allow yourself to drift backward to a time before Hogwarts, before wands chose wizards, to a single man in silver robes, standing at the edge of England with ambition in his eyes. Armand Malfoy. And the first stone laid in the soil of Wiltshire. Armand Malfoy, the first of his name. History often remembers the victors. But in Wizarding Britain, it remembers the landowners, especially those whose names are etched into the very soil they claimed centuries ago. Among them, no name carries quite the same weight, the same glint of cold silver, as Malfoy. The story begins not in Wiltshire, nor even in the British Isles, but in Normandy, around the year 1066. The man who would become Armand Malfoy, a skilled wizard of considerable ambition, served in the magical vanguard of William the Conqueror's Norman invasion of England. Though Muggle chroniclers speak only of swords and shields at Hastings, wizarding records held deep in the Department of Mysteries whisper of unseen duels waged in parallel, as magical forces silently tipped the scales of history. Armand was one of several continental wizards who saw opportunity in England's political upheaval. But unlike others, he had no interest in serving the new Norman crown long term. His aim was property, land that could be made sovereign in all but name, governed by magic, not monarchs. And William obliged. Whether through coercion, enchantment, or payment is lost to time, but Armand Malfoy was granted a vast estate in Wiltshire, land that would one day become Malfoy Manor and its surrounding holdings. There, in the rolling hills of southern England, the House of Malfoy was born. The French line. Malfoy, contrary to popular belief, was not a name fabricated for theatrical effect. It was Old Norman French, mal-foi, meaning bad faith. A name given, some said, by Armand's enemies. Others believe he chose it deliberately, a badge of cunning, of guile. Armand valued power, but he valued perception even more. To be feared was to be respected. To be mysterious was to be untouchable. Though Armand spoke flawless Latin and practiced wandless magic learned from obscure French sects, he quickly adopted the English language and customs when convenient. He struck deals with newly crowned Norman lords, married a minor noblewoman of wizarding lineage, and began amassing wealth through both magical means and estate taxation. Muggle tenant farmers worked the land, never aware their silent landlord could hex a blade of wheat into fire if displeased. But Armand was no reckless brute. He was a tactician. He kept to the shadows, rarely intervened in Muggle affairs after 1070, and carefully cultivated relationships with other wizarding families who had recently migrated from the continent. The early Malfoys, through Armand's example, believed in power behind the curtain, not brute dominance, but careful, calculated control. Magic and secrecy. During Armand's life, the relationship between the magical and Muggle worlds was still open, if strained. Witches and wizards occasionally held positions in Muggle courts or served as healers, scholars, and astrologers. Armand himself was rumored to have advised several Norman barons on alchemical fortifications and weather control during wartime campaigns. Yet even he could see the tide turning. As Muggle distrust of magic grew through the 12th century, the Malfoy patriarch made a strategic withdrawal from public affairs. He built underground tunnels beneath his estate for safe passage. He trained his sons in concealment spells, bloodline preservation, and potion craft. He forged ties with pure-blood families already sowing the seeds of what would become the Sacred 28. By the end of Armand's life, Malfoy Manor was no longer just a home. It was a fortress of ideology, a monument to the belief that wizards were not only different from Muggles, but inherently superior. A legacy cast in stone. Armand died quietly, at home, in the year 1123. His funeral was attended only by magical kin. His wand, carved from yew and tipped with basilisk bone, was entombed with him beneath the east wing of the manor, a secret crypt sealed with ancient wards. He left behind 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, each as ambitious as their father. His eldest, 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑 Malfoy, inherited the estate and began the tradition of Malfoy men serving in what would eventually become the 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑. Armand's descendants would speak of him not as a gentle patriarch, but as a founder. A warlock with vision. A man who saw England not as a home, but as a game board. His portrait still hangs in the west corridor of Malfoy Manor, eyes gleaming beneath silver brows, wand resting in one gloved hand, as if daring the viewer to challenge his legacy. The Malfoys and Muggle monarchs. For a time, the House of Malfoy walked in 2 worlds. Theirs was a name whispered not only in the halls of the growing British wizarding elite, but also in candlelit antechambers of royal courts. During the medieval period, the Malfoys practiced what they would later denounce, collaboration with Muggles. Though Armand had stepped away from direct dealings with non-magical authorities in his later years, his descendants were more daring, some would say more reckless. The next few generations saw Malfoys operating as secret advisors to kings, queens, and noble families. Behind velvet curtains, they offered weather enchantments to assist in naval battles, curses disguised as plagues against foreign rivals, and protective charms on fortresses that, to the Muggle eye, never fell. This was not kindness. It was commerce. Court wizards and quiet influence. During the Plantagenet era, the Malfoys were rumored to have advised King Edward I, though no surviving Muggle record confirms this. Edward's rapid military gains and unexpectedly clear weather during the conquest of Wales were whispered among magical historians as the result of Malfoy interference. By the 1400s, the family had become masters of disguised diplomacy. They used enchanted messengers, glamoured identities, and bribed squids posing as translators. Malfoys did not stand beside thrones, they stood behind curtains. In one disputed case, a Malfoy ancestor, possibly Tiberius Malfoy, was said to have tried charming Henry VIII's chief advisor, hoping to push for anti-Muggle-born policies within church doctrine. The attempt failed. The advisor, a natural accoutrement, resisted the spell and had the wizard chased from court. While the story survives in both magical and Muggle satire, it marks a turning point in the family's attitude toward Muggle collaboration. Humiliation taught them a valuable lesson: real power was not in being seen, it was in being feared and unknown. Retreat from the non-magical world. As the Statute of Secrecy loomed in the late 1600s, the Malfoys were among the first to argue for complete magical withdrawal from Muggle society. They lobbied behind the scenes in the 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑, championing magical separation, not out of safety, but out of superiority. In the secret records of the Ministry's Department of Magical Law, now sealed, there exists a letter dated 1681, penned by Cassius Malfoy, warning: "Muggles breed disorder like mold in a cellar. To consort with them is to court rot." By the time the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy was enacted in 1692, the Malfoys had already removed themselves from all Muggle-facing roles. Their fortunes, once built partly on Muggle alliances, were now redirected into magical banking, potion exportation, and the acquisition of cursed heirlooms. They reinforced the manor with enchantments so powerful that no Muggle could even perceive its gates, let alone approach them. Their name began to vanish from the non-magical records, burned from family trees and court ledgers, whispered only in scandalous local folklore. The reinvention of purity. With their retreat came reinvention. The Malfoys, once opportunists, rebranded themselves as guardians of magical blood. Their ties to royalty were now considered shameful anecdotes, spoken of only in private. It was around this time that the family doctrine was carved into their stone vault in Wiltshire. Mundus Magica Supra Omnia, the magical world above all. What began as ambition became ideology. What began as cooperation became contempt. By the dawn of the 18th century, the Malfoys had successfully erased their flirtations with Muggle kings and queens. In their place stood a family cloaked in elitism, one that viewed Muggles not as pawns, but as pests. And so, from the ashes of forgotten courts, the modern Malfoy identity was born, not as servants to power, but as its quiet inheritors. The birth of the manor. To understand the Malfoy family is to understand the house they built, not simply as a dwelling, but as a monument to their ideology. Set deep within the secluded hills of Wiltshire, Malfoy Manor rose over generations like a stone declaration. More than a residence, it was a fortress, a throne, a cathedral to bloodline and tradition. Its earliest stones were laid in the 12th century, with expansions and enchantments added steadily through the Tudor and Georgian eras. Each corridor held a memory. Each staircase, a warning. The manor was a reflection of the family itself, proud, secretive, and steeped in old magic. Foundations in enchantment. Unlike many wizarding households, which expanded organically over time, the Malfoy Manor was deliberately constructed with magical symmetry. The layout followed arcane geometries, patterns said to enhance the protective enchantments cast upon it. The very stones were transported by levitation and shaped by wand. A circle of wards was anchored into the earth beneath its cellars, tied to runestones that still hum with ancient energy. The central hall was the first completed, a towering atrium lit by floating candelabras and ringed with portraits of Malfoy patriarchs. This chamber, said to be designed by Septimus Malfoy, Armand's heir, would eventually become the main gathering space for visiting dignitaries, allies, and, centuries later, Dark Lords. No Muggle has ever set foot in the manor. None ever will. The Forbidden Wing. By the 15th century, the manor's east wing was sealed. Whispers in the family archive suggest that this section of the house housed volatile magical objects acquired during the Goblin rebellions, including cursed blades, illegal spellbooks, and rare potion ingredients. Some believe it also conceals Armand Malfoy's burial crypt, as his tomb was never officially documented. The entrance to the east wing was concealed behind a portrait of a blindfolded serpent. The painting, itself sentient, would only open for a true Malfoy heir who spoke the family's motto in Latin. Over time, the Forbidden Wing came to symbolize more than secrecy. It was a physical reminder to younger Malfoys of the power their family had once wielded, and what might be reclaimed. House elves and hierarchy. From its earliest days, the manor was staffed by generations of house elves, bound by blood oath to serve only the Malfoy line. Unlike the warm relationships seen in other wizarding households, the Malfoys treated their elves as tools, not kin. Even Dobby, the elf eventually freed by Harry Potter, spent decades in silent servitude within these walls. The elves were not permitted in the drawing room during family meetings, nor in the study where spellcraft and bloodline rituals were conducted. They cooked in silence and vanished from sight before footsteps echoed down the corridor. It was, in all ways, a house that breathed control. The walled garden and the white serpent. The outer grounds of the manor included a private walled garden, first designed during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. At its center, a white marble statue of a serpent wrapped around a sword, its fangs pointed not downward in defense, but forward in challenge. It became the family's unofficial emblem, predating the stylized serpent of Slytherin house, to which nearly every Malfoy would one day belong. Potent herbology was practiced here, with some of the earliest wolfsbane cultivations and thestral attracting nightshade traced to Malfoy soil. The gardens also contained hidden rooms, invisible to the eye, which, according to family lore, could paralyze intruders if disturbed without permission. A house as a weapon. The manor's magic deepened over time. Visitors reported the feeling of being watched, even when alone. Windows would darken during ministry investigations. Rooms would seal off when secrets were being spoken. The home became not merely a setting but an accomplice, an enchanted guardian to a family that trusted no one. During the First Wizarding War, the manor housed secret meetings of the Death Eaters, though only the drawing room and lower hall were used. Even Voldemort, despite his dominance over Lucius, never fully trusted the house. He preferred to meet beneath the chandelier and not beneath the family crest. And still, the manor endured. Stone and blood. By the end of the 20th century, Malfoy Manor had become the oldest continuously inhabited pureblood estate in Britain. Other families faded. Others were destroyed. But the Malfoys endured because they had built not just a name, but a stronghold. Even in disgrace, the manor stood tall. And in the silence of its corridors, the past still lingers, listening, watching, waiting to see if the new generation will live up to the stone beneath their feet. Purity and prejudice. If Malfoy Manor was a fortress, then its ideology was the stone it was built from. Long before the world knew names like Voldemort or Grindelwald, the Malfoys had crafted a worldview centered on blood purity, tradition, and social hierarchy. To them, blood was more than biology. It was belief. The notion that magical power could or should be diluted by intermarriage with Muggleborns or half-bloods was not merely taboo, it was treason against heritage. And though the Malfoys rarely preached in public, they lobbied in silence, whispered in drawing rooms, and voted in 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑 chambers to preserve their sacred lineage. By the 1700s, the Malfoy family had become one of the most outspoken internal proponents of a wizarding caste system, one built not on merit, but on ancestry. The Sacred 28. In the early 20th century, a private directory known as the Sacred 28 was compiled, a list of the most untainted wizarding families in Britain. While its author remains unknown, though some historians suspect cantankerous not, the Malfoys were not only included, they were considered model members. The Malfoys treated this list as a badge of superiority. Copies were kept in both the study and the master bedroom of the manor. Family lore states that young Draco was made to memorize the names before he could fluently read spells. Guests who were not from the 28 were rarely allowed past the front gates. But even within this exclusive circle, the Malfoys held themselves apart. They viewed the Weasleys, despite their pure blood, as traitors to their kind. Too warm toward Muggle-borns, too poor, too populist. By contrast, families like the Avery, Rosier, and Yaxley lines remained preferred associates. Marriages of strategy. The Malfoys treated marriage not as a romantic affair but as an extension of family politics. Every union was chosen to strengthen lineage, maintain alliances, and distance themselves from the threat of blood dilution. While some pure-blood families allowed marriages with half-bloods, especially in the declining post-war years, the Malfoys resisted until social tides forced their hand. When Lucius Malfoy married Narcissa Black, the match was seen as one of the last great dynastic alliances in British wizarding history. The Blacks, like the Malfoys, were obsessed with bloodline purity. Together, the union united two crests steeped in arrogance and preservationism. The pressure to continue that legacy would fall heavily on their only son. The Malfoys and Hogwarts. Despite their public support of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the Malfoys never viewed it as a place of learning. To them, it was a sorting pen, a test of superiority where only the right houses, bloodlines, and manners mattered. For generations, Malfoys were sorted into Slytherin House, and they wore the serpent like a second skin. They avoided professors with progressive leanings, funded events that promoted traditionalism, and discouraged friendships outside of their narrow social circle. When Draco began his education at Hogwarts, he was instructed from an early age to avoid the likes of Hermione Granger, who, despite her talent, was seen as a threat to the old order. Even Harry Potter, whose blood was half wizard, half nobody as Lucius once put it, represented everything the Malfoys feared: charisma without pedigree. Muggle-born disdain. To the Malfoys, Muggle-borns were not equals. They were anomalies, magical mistakes. Lucius once petitioned the Department of Magical Education to consider formal limits on the number of Muggle-born students per house, a motion that was dismissed, but not forgotten. In the years before Voldemort's return, the Malfoys quietly funded heritage awareness events and collected enchanted genealogy scrolls designed to track blood status. Some within the ministry joked that if Lucius had his way, every wizard would wear their family tree around their neck. Between pride and paranoia. By the time Lord Voldemort returned to power, the Malfoys found them. On the other hand, was a fanatic. And when Draco was pulled into the Dark Lord's service, the Malfoys saw their ideology turned against them. They had spoken of blood purity for centuries, but never imagined their own son would be used as proof of it. The curse of legacy. Pure blood ideology, once their shield, became their prison. The Malfoys were no longer just wealthy aristocrats with prejudices, they were collaborators with a tyrant. After the war, the term pureblood lost its prestige. But the Malfoy name, unlike many, survived. It survived because, by the end, it chose family over philosophy. Still, the scars remained. And in every hallway of Malfoy Manor, where portraits of sneering ancestors still hang, the question lingers: what did purity ever truly protect them from? Malfoys in the Ministry. If Malfoy Manor was the family's castle, then the Ministry of Magic was its court. Not in name, but in function. Over centuries, the Malfoys perfected the art of steering law, policy, and public perception without ever having to raise a wand. Others fought revolutions. The Malfoys rewrote regulations. They never desired the spotlight, only the leverage that lived behind it. The quiet hand. Official records show surprisingly few Malfoys ever held ministerial titles, and this was no accident. The family preferred proximity to power over accountability to it. Their influence was channeled through donations, inheritance-driven posts, and intermarriages with other elite families that occupied the ministry's upper ranks. One ancestor, Septimus Malfoy, served as senior secretary to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement in the 1700s. Though technically second in command, internal records suggest he exercised greater influence than the head of department, crafting bylaws and internal codes that favored pureblood hiring and heritage transparency among staff. These quiet policies became a template. The Malfoys rarely needed to change laws directly, they simply rewrote the incentives behind them. The patronage network. By the Victorian era, the Malfoys had developed a patronage network within the ministry, particularly within the Department of International Magical Cooperation, Magical Games and Sports, and Wizarding Education. This ensured that scholarships, travel grants, and athletic opportunities leaned heavily toward pureblood families aligned with the Malfoy worldview. An internal memo from 1887 revealed that Malfoy-funded events at Hogwarts saw nearly 92% of prizes awarded to Slytherins, a detail that was quietly buried after complaints from staff. The family also maintained close ties with Gringotts, where they funneled donations into cultural institutions while simultaneously avoiding certain taxes by exploiting antique artifact laws. Their legal representatives, often former ministry employees themselves, were rarely questioned. No family had their hands so deep in the gears of wizarding government and left so few fingerprints. Lucius Ascends. It was Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, who turned subtlety into strategy. Educated at Hogwarts in the late 1960s and sorted into Slytherin, Lucius cultivated a reputation for charm, discipline, and cold ambition. He joined the Board of Governors of Hogwarts before his 30th birthday and was soon recognized as one of the ministry's most generous private citizens. His campaign donations, legal advice, and family name opened nearly every door. Though Lucius never held formal office, he was often seen visiting the Minister for Magic, and more than once his presence was known to precede sudden changes in hiring policy or funding direction. If Lucius visited your department, you prepared for a shift in your career, either up or out. He also developed relationships with the Daily Prophet, ensuring that Malfoy-related articles rarely bore criticism. In fact, from 1981 to 1995, not a single editorial page in the Prophet condemned Lucius by name, despite rumors of Death Eater affiliations that had circulated for over a decade. The Imperial Defense. Lucius' rise was interrupted by the fall of Voldemort in 1981. As a known supporter, though never convicted, he narrowly escaped punishment by claiming he had been acting under the Imperius Curse. It was a defense used by others, but Lucius employed it with such eloquence and preemptive generosity toward the ministry that he was not only spared imprisonment, he was welcomed back into society. His wife, Narcissa, never doubted him. His peers, even those who loathed him, admitted his brilliance. His enemies knew better than to cross him openly. The Malfoys were not just a wealthy family, they were a political entity capable of shielding themselves with the very institutions meant to restrain them. The ministry under siege. When Voldemort returned, Lucius' ties to the ministry became a liability. Under Voldemort's orders, he used those connections to insert spies and twist regulations. He gained access to the Department of Mysteries, smuggled cursed objects into the country, and attended meetings at the manor with officials whose loyalty could be bought with gold or fear. But after the failed mission at the Department of Mysteries in 1996, Lucius lost everything. He was imprisoned in Azkaban, his wealth scrutinized, his name tarnished. For the first time in centuries, the Malfoys found themselves stripped of influence in a system they once quietly controlled. And yet, even at their lowest, their legacy survived. No ministry dared seize the manor. No law was passed that named Lucius directly. His son, Draco, was allowed to return to Hogwarts. His wife remained untouched. The Malfoy name, bruised but unbroken, remained fixed in the upper echelons of wizarding memory. The ministry today. After the war, the Malfoys retreated from public affairs. No Malfoy has served in any official magical government role since the Second Wizarding War. But their files remain thick in the Department of Magical Law, and their influence, though dormant, still lingers in the margins of old contracts, buried vaults, and whispered names in darkened halls. For the Malfoys, power was never about position. It was about presence. And even now, behind the gilded doors of the Ministry, that presence has never fully left. Lucius Malfoy, the serpent politician. Lucius 𝒍𝒆𝒆 Malfoy was born into legacy, raised on ideology, and taught from the cradle that influence was not earned, it was inherited, wielded, and protected. From the moment he could walk the halls of Malfoy Manor, he was surrounded by the trappings of superiority, enchanted portraits that bowed to him, house elves that flinched at his glance, and spellbooks older than many wizarding families. But unlike some pure-blood sons, Lucius did not waste his privilege. He sharpened it like a blade. He was the culmination of generations of planning, a politician in the skin of a pureblood heir. The making of a Slytherin. Lucius entered Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the late 1960s and was sorted into Slytherin House without hesitation. Even among Slytherins, Lucius stood apart, polished, calculating, and already fluent in the politics of status. He quickly earned a seat at the Slug Club, where his refined manners and deep family coffers made him a favorite of Professor Slughorn. But Lucius never confused friendship with utility. He observed, gathered favors, and catalogued weaknesses like a bureaucrat in training. By his 5th year, he had become a prefect, and though he never attained head boy, his reputation carried the same weight. His peers feared his tongue more than his wand. He graduated with strong marks in charms, transfiguration, and defense against the dark arts, but it was his aptitude for manipulation, not magic, that set him apart. The Black Alliance. Lucius's marriage to Narcissa Black was not a romantic tale. It was an arrangement of bloodlines, power, and aligned ideology. The Blacks, one of the few families as ancient and proud as the Malfoys, were steeped in similar beliefs. Narcissa's cousin, Bellatrix, would soon become Voldemort's most fanatical follower. Her sister, Andromeda, had been cast out for marrying a Muggle-born. Narcissa, the middle child, was the perfect bridge, beautiful, poised, and devoted to her family's ideals. Their wedding united 2 of the most elite houses in Britain. The guest list was a roll call of the Sacred 28. Gold flowed like mead, and under the pale glow of floating chandeliers, the future of wizarding elitism was celebrated in silk and silver. Early career and the Board of Governors. Lucius, preferring to operate above rather than within the ministry, joined the Hogwarts Board of Governors in his 30s. From there, he oversaw budgets, staffing, and educational policy, ensuring Slytherin priorities remained intact and Muggle-born admissions were carefully scrutinized, if not outright discouraged. He used his position to champion heritage programs, advocate for stricter curriculum standards on bloodline history, and fund renovations to the Slytherin Common Room. When Albus Dumbledore resisted these changes, Lucius began a years-long quiet campaign to have him replaced. At the same time, Lucius developed ties within Gringotts, Wizengamot advisory committees, and the Daily Prophet, using his wealth to manipulate headlines and bury scandals before they could ignite. He didn't need to be minister. He already had everything a minister needed, except the scrutiny. The dark mark in the shadows. Beneath the veneer of political elegance, Lucius was already a Death Eater. He aligned with Lord Voldemort during the First Wizarding War not out of devotion, but out of calculation. The Dark Lord's ideology matched the Malfoy worldview, purity, power, order. But where others followed out of fear or fanaticism, Lucius followed because he believed Voldemort might reshape the world to suit the Malfoys. He never acted recklessly. He avoided frontline battle. His contributions were measured: money, artifacts, names, protection. He used the Malfoy estate to host meetings but kept a distance from bloodshed when possible. When Voldemort fell in 1981, Lucius was already ahead of the fall. He arrived at the Ministry days after the Dark Lord's disappearance, wand surrendered, eyes wide with sincerity. He claimed he had been under the Imperious curse, and in the absence of direct evidence, the ministry accepted his plea. It was not forgiveness. It was strategy. The ministry needed peace. Lucius provided it, quietly. The quiet years. During the years of Voldemort's absence, Lucius doubled down on his public image. He increased his donations to the ministry, hosted lavish charity events, and took care to be seen speaking cordially with half-blood ministry officials, though never Muggle-borns. He became a father, naming his only son Draco, after the Latin word for dragon. The child would be a new heir to the legacy, a living link to both the Malfoy and Black bloodlines. Lucius raised Draco with precision, discipline, pride, etiquette. Every step was calculated. Every lesson laced with centuries of unspoken expectations. Weakness was not permitted. Empathy was discouraged. Control was everything. Beneath the smile. Yet even in these golden years, Lucius' ambition did not fade. He collected rare dark artifacts, many illegally obtained. He corresponded with former Death Eaters under coded names. And he waited. Not out of hope, but out of belief that the world would turn again, and when it did, he would not miss his place in the next order. The serpent in Lucius was always coiled, elegant, silent, and ready. But the rise of Lord Voldemort a second time would test not only his loyalty, but the very foundation of everything the Malfoys had built. He thought he could shape the future. He did not expect to become its hostage. Narcissa, the unspoken power. If Lucius Malfoy was the strategist of the family, Narcissa Black Malfoy was its spine, unbending, quiet, and ultimately, unbreakable. She did not wear the dark mark. She did not hold office. She rarely raised her voice. But Narcissa held a kind of power the Malfoy name had never known, not the power of blood or gold, but of love weaponized, cool, clinical, and absolute. In a family ruled by legacy and law, Narcissa was the only one who ever rewrote the rules. A daughter of the noble House of Black. Narcissa was born into one of the oldest and most prideful pureblood families in Britain. The House of Black had long held itself above the rest of the wizarding world, known for producing prodigies, zealots, and the occasional traitor. She was the youngest of three sisters, Bellatrix, the fierce and fanatical, Andromeda, the defiant and disowned, and Narcissa, the poised and quiet storm. Where Bellatrix thrived on fire and Andromeda on rebellion, Narcissa wielded something more dangerous, self-mastery. She learned early that silence carried further than shouting. She understood how to turn presence into pressure. Her words were precise, her affections measured. In the great drawing rooms of 12, Grimmauld Place, she was the shadow who listened, gathering secrets even as a girl. The Malfoy Union. Her marriage to Lucius Malfoy was both political and personal. The two shared more than blood purity, they shared belief. They saw the wizarding world as a place to be curated, not shared. And in Lucius, Narcissa found a man whose ambition mirrored her own cold clarity. Unlike Bellatrix, who gave her soul to Voldemort, or Andromeda, who gave her name to love, Narcissa chose a third path, loyalty to bloodline, but only through the lens of her son. For Narcissa, family did not mean duty to all Malfoys or all Blacks. It meant Draco, and Draco alone. Mistress of the Manor. Narcissa took to life at Malfoy Manor like a queen to her court. She managed the estate, oversaw social events, and curated their public image with surgical precision. When ministry officials visited, she greeted them with cool charm. When their house elf Dobby disobeyed, she was the one who issued the quiet punishments. She never needed to raise her voice. Her presence bent the room around her. Though Lucius was the public face of the family, Narcissa was its unspoken executive. She reviewed correspondence, advised on alliances, and determined which witches and wizards would be allowed into their inner circle. She was not simply a wife, she was a power broker in pearls. Bellatrix and the Divide. As Voldemort rose again, Narcissa watched her sister Bellatrix fall deeper into madness. Though they shared the same blood and once the same beliefs, Narcissa recoiled from her sister's violence. Bellatrix lived to serve the Dark Lord. Narcissa lived to survive him. There is no record of Narcissa ever attending a Death Eater meeting. She never tortured, killed, or recruited. But she did not resist, either. She kept her silence. She played the part of the devoted wife. And when the manor was taken over by Voldemort's forces, she never spoke out. She observed, she endured, and above all, she protected Draco. The Forest Lie. In the final days of the war, as Voldemort believed he had defeated Harry Potter, it was Narcissa Malfoy who performed the single most pivotal act of silent rebellion in the entire war. Ordered to confirm Harry's death, she bent down, leaned close, and whispered, "Is Draco alive?" When Harry answered yes, she stood, turned, and lied to the Dark Lord's face. "He is dead," she said, and in doing so, she saved Harry's life, and with him, the future of the wizarding world. She did not do it for the Order. She did not do it for good. She did it for family. And for the first time, a Malfoy turned against their own ideology, not with spells, but with a sentence. After the war, Narcissa did not stand trial. She was never imprisoned. The Ministry, still rattled from the war, knew the truth. Narcissa Malfoy had saved their world in the forest, and they owed her silence. She retreated into privacy, returning to the manor as its quiet matriarch. Lucius, broken and disgraced, relied on her more than ever. And Draco, now grown, never spoke of what his mother had done, but he carried it with him always. She had lied for him, lived for him. And in doing so, she had become the most powerful Malfoy of them all, not in office or name, but in action. Narcissa Black Malfoy never raised her wand. She didn't need to. She changed the course of wizarding history with a single breath. A prince is born in Draco's early years. From the moment Draco Lucius Malfoy drew his first breath beneath the silver-stitched canopy of the Malfoy Manor nursery, he was destined not for childhood, but for inheritance. He was the long-awaited scion of two of the most powerful pureblood families in wizarding Britain, Malfoy and Black. His birth was not just a celebration, it was a coronation. Every step, every lesson, every whispered bedtime story was part of an unspoken curriculum, not how to live, but how to rule. A heir shaped in marble. Draco was born in June 1980, less than 2 months before Harry Potter. But their first years could not have been more different. Where Harry knew nothing of his name, Draco was drenched in it. The nursery in Malfoy Manor was a study in excess. Hand-carved cribs, floating mobiles that mimicked Quidditch plays from centuries past, books in old Latin shelved before he could read. Narcissa insisted on daily lessons in etiquette before Draco turned 4. Lucius hand-selected tutors, some not even ministry-sanctioned, to instruct the boy in wandless focus, lineage, and magical theory. He was not given toys. He was given standards. While most wizarding children learned magic through play, Draco was trained with precision. Games were tests. Mistakes were lessons. The house elves feared to drop his bath towel, lest Lucius witness a lapse in order. And yet, Narcissa was always near. She oversaw every meal, every lesson, every guest interaction. Her love for Draco was real, but it was expressed in control, not comfort. He was her masterpiece, and no brushstroke could be out of place. Early indoctrination. Draco's first understanding of the world was shaped by words whispered around tea trays and drawing room doors. We do not associate with their kind. A Weasley would rather beg than bathe. Potter's blood is half fog. He learned that blood was not just red, it was ranked. That some names deserved reverence, and others deserved distance. Lucius ensured that Draco memorized the sacred 28 by age 6. Narcissa would test him during breakfast, slipping in trick questions to see if he would notice a non-pure blood name hidden among the greats. He always did. Their worldview became his own, not through force, but through inheritance. He was not taught to hate, but to look down. And in many ways, that was worse. Draco and the Wand. Though Hogwarts acceptance comes at 11, pure-blood heirs were introduced to wands much earlier. Draco received his first wand handling lessons at age 7 using training models. He showed early talent in dueling footwork, and his tutors noted a knack for precision spells, not flashy, but clean. Lucius believed in competitive education. If another pure-blood child mastered a charm before Draco, the tutor was dismissed. If Draco fell behind, he was corrected, not with cruelty, but with cold disappointment that hurt more than any punishment. Friends and puppets. Draco's early friends were carefully chosen: Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle, sons of Death Eaters and blunt instruments of loyalty. The three were often together at social functions, but its bank. He did not yet know what true companionship was. He only knew alliance. Whisper of the Boy Who Lived. In 1981, the fall of Lord Voldemort sent shockwaves through the wizarding world, but not immediately through Draco's nursery. Lucius returned home from the ministry shaken but unbroken. He told Narcissa to double the wards. He claimed that Dark Lord would return, and that their family must remain intact, spotless, and untouchable. As Draco grew, he began to hear stories. A boy. A prophecy. A scar. Harry Potter. His name was mentioned in hushed tones at formal dinners, always with derision, and yet, there was something in Lucius's eyes when he spoke of him. Fear, perhaps. Jealousy, maybe. A challenge. Draco did not understand it fully. Not yet. But deep in the manor, among the books of ancestry and the silver-tipped scrolls of Malfoy history, a rivalry began to grow, one that would shape Draco's identity even before their first meeting. The invitation. When Draco received his Hogwarts letter by Owl, it was not a surprise, it was a rite. A foregone conclusion. His parents hosted a private dinner to mark the occasion. There were no balloons, no jokes, no warm farewells. Lucius reminded him that he was not to befriend Hufflepuffs. Narcissa adjusted his collar and whispered, "Remember who you are." He left for school not as a boy seeking knowledge, but as a soldier sent to guard a bloodline. What neither of his parents realized, what Draco himself did not yet know, was that within the walls of Hogwarts, for the first time in his life, he would be challenged. And it would begin not with magic, but with a handshake refused. Hogwarts, rivalries and reflections. From the moment Draco Malfoy stepped onto platform 9 3/4, he carried more than a trunk and a wand. He carried a legacy, one polished into perfection and sharpened into prejudice. But Hogwarts, a school filled with mudbloods, blood traitors, half-giants, and ghosts, was not built to accommodate legacy. It was built to test it. And Draco was about to be tested. The boy who would not shake his hand. The tale of Draco's Hogwarts years begins not in the dungeons of Slytherin, but in a corridor aboard the Hogwarts Express. It was there, clad in tailored black robes and flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, that Draco offered his hand to a boy with a lightning scar. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are better than others, Potter." Harry refused the gesture. It was a moment small in action, massive in consequence. A rejection not just of Draco, but of everything he represented. The scion of the Malfoys, dismissed like a common pest. For the first time, Draco felt the sting of irrelevance. And he never forgot it. From that moment on, Harry Potter became more than a rival, he became an obsession. Slytherin House, the home of mirrors. The Sorting Hat barely touched Draco's head before calling out Slytherin. He was among his kind. The cunning, the proud, the ambitious. But even here, Draco found no true peers. He saw only pawns. Crabbe and Goyle remained his muscle. Pansy Parkinson admired him with sycophantic sighs. But none challenged him. None understood him. In the common room beneath the lake, among the green-glassed windows and hissing torches, Draco began to see his house for what it was, a reflection of his own family, powerful, elegant, but ultimately cold and closed. The approval he once craved from peers became hunger for something else, dominance. Academic rivalry. Draco was not unintelligent, on the contrary, he was sharp, especially in potions and charms. But he could never quite eclipse Hermione Granger, the muggle-born girl he was raised to ignore. She was everything he was not, precise, tireless, and immune to flattery. The presence of Granger, and her proximity to Harry, gnawed at him. Every class she outperformed him, every answer she offered before him, chipped away at the wall of superiority he had built since infancy. And yet, he could not admit it. Instead, he called her names, mudblood, know-it-all, not because he believed she was lesser, but because he feared she was not. Quidditch and the Cult of Glory. In second year, Draco was made Seeker of the Slytherin Quidditch team, though not purely on merit. His father had donated a full set of Nimbus 2001s to the team, ensuring his son's place in the sky. But Draco, to his credit, trained hard. He was agile, competitive, and unafraid of risk. The broom elevated him, but it did not guarantee success. Harry's skill on the field was instinctual, while Draco's was tactical. Every loss stung deeper because it wasn't just a game. It was another arena in which he could not claim superiority. Still, Draco learned a valuable lesson from Quidditch. How to perform under pressure, how to command an audience, and how to weaponize attention. These lessons would serve him later, when the stakes were far higher than a snitch. The Inquisitor and the Year of Control. By fifth year, Lucius Malfoy had succeeded in installing Dolores Umbridge at Hogwarts through ministry manipulation. Draco joined the Inquisitorial Squad, a student militia of sorts, relishing the authority it gave him over his peers, especially Harry. He patrolled corridors, deducted house points, and for once, felt the weight of control in his wand hand. But the power was hollow. Temporary. Illusory. Beneath the pink quills and smile masks, the school was boiling. And Draco could feel it. He could feel the tension rising like steam through the floorboards. He did not know it then, but this was the last year Hogwarts would feel like home. Reflections in the mirror. Through all his years, Draco kept up the performance, the sneer, the swagger, the smug superiority. But in moments of solitude, in the shadows of the astronomy tower, in the quiet after curfew, he wondered. He wondered why Harry, born in a cupboard, commanded loyalty he never could. He wondered why Hermione, born to dentists, surpassed him in every spell. He wondered why, no matter how perfectly he played the part, he always felt like an imposter. And somewhere deep in his chest, a crack began to form. Not enough to break him. Not yet. But enough to let doubt in. The beginning of the end. Draco's time at Hogwarts would not end in exams and house points. It would end in shadows, curses, and blood. But in these early years, as he struggled between the world he was taught and the one he lived in, the seeds of transformation were planted. He did not yet know what they would grow into. But the boy who entered Hogwarts with a silver spoon would not leave with a silver soul. He would leave marked, not by scars, but by choices. The Dark Mark and the Vanishing Cabinet. Draco Malfoy had always played at power, riding brooms bought by his father, wielding words sharpened by bloodline, following the script laid out by generations of Malfoys before him. But in his 6th year at Hogwarts, the stage changed. And so did the cost of performance. What had once been rivalry became war. What had once been words became orders. What had once been arrogance became fear. The mark that wasn't a choice. At the end of his 5th year, Draco returned home not to celebration, but to silence. His father, Lucius, had failed. The raid on the Department of Mysteries had been a disaster. The prophecy lost. The Death Eaters exposed. Lucius imprisoned. And Voldemort was displeased. In punishment, he gave Lucius's son a task, not as a reward, but as a message: no one in the Dark Lord service is untouchable. Draco Malfoy was branded with a dark mark, burned into his forearm. A snake and skull that seared deeper than flesh. To the world, he was now a man. To Voldemort, he was a pawn. And to himself, he was a boy drowning in expectations he could not escape. A mission of death. Draco's mission was not assassination. It was humiliation. Voldemort commanded him to kill Albus Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard alive, knowing the boy would fail. Failure, in this case, was the point. It would punish Lucius. It would break Narcissa. But Draco did not see this at first. He saw an opportunity to prove himself, to reclaim the Malfoy name, to restore the honor his father had lost. So he accepted, and returned to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry as a weapon in uniform. The Vanishing Cabinet. Draco's plan was brilliant. Improvised, yes, but brilliant. He discovered that a pair of vanishing cabinets, one at Borgin and Berks and one inside Hogwarts, could form a portal between the school and the outside world. If repaired, the passage could smuggle Death Eaters directly into the castle. For months, he worked in secret. Isolated. Obsessive. He skipped meals. He withdrew from his friends. He haunted the room of requirement like a ghost in velvet robes. This was not the Draco Malfoy of taunts and sneers. This was a young man unraveling, trying to piece together a life before he was forced to take one. Cracks beneath the cool. As the months dragged on, the mission wore him down. He became paler. His hands shook. He jumped at shadows. He failed at his first attempt to poison Dumbledore. Then again, when he cursed Madame Rosmerta to deliver a cursed necklace to Katie Bell, an attack that nearly killed a fellow student. The failures were not strategic errors. They were hesitations. Deep, human hesitations. Draco could speak of murder. But when it came close, when death brushed past him, his courage vanished. Because he didn't want to be a killer. He just didn't want to be nothing. Bathroom breakdown. In a moment of rare vulnerability, Draco sought refuge in a deserted bathroom. There, standing at a sink cracked by time and tears, he came face to face with Harry Potter. What followed was not a duel. It was a collapse. Harry cast Sectum Sempra, a dark spell he did not understand, and Draco was torn open. Bleeding, gasping, powerless. It was a mirror of the truth. Beneath all the masks and lineage and arrogance, Draco was still a boy, scared and out of his depth. Only the intervention of Severus Snape saved him. But the wounds went deeper than spell work. He had been seen, not as a Malfoy, but as a child trying to survive. And nothing was more dangerous than that. The Astronomy Tower. When the night finally came, Draco stood face to face with Dumbledore at the top of the tower. Wand raised. Heart thundering. The headmaster, disarmed, calm, kind, spoke not with condemnation, but with understanding. "You are not a killer, Draco." And he wasn't. He could not do it. In that moment, everything his family taught him cracked. The line between duty and identity shattered. And as the Death Eaters arrived, as Severus Snape stepped forward and fulfilled the task in his place, Draco lowered his wand. Not out of failure, but out of choice. The weight of the mark. Draco fled the school that night, not as a victor or a villain, but as something far more dangerous to Voldemort, a witness. He had seen the war up close. Had been used, then discarded. And while he said little in the months that followed, while he returned home to a manor overtaken by Death Eaters and a mother consumed by fear, Draco understood something new. That power without choice was slavery. That legacy without morality was poison. And that whatever the future held, he did not want to become the man his father had been. Narcissa's lie. In the cold, cursed twilight of the Second Wizarding War, when hope flickered and Hogwarts burned, it was not a wand that changed the course of history. It was a lie. A whisper in the forest. A mother's breath. And it belonged to Narcissa Malfoy. A family on the edge. By the time the final battle began, the Malfoys were no longer proud aristocrats. They were fractured, fearful, and walking a tightrope above annihilation. The Malfoy Manor, once a seat of power, had become a prison. Voldemort had turned it into his war room, a place of cruelty and control. Lucius, stripped of status, was a husk of his former self. Narcissa moved like a ghost between rooms, tending to a house that was no longer hers. And Draco had returned from Hogwarts changed. Not defiant, not rebellious, but quieter, wearier, more watchful. He obeyed Voldemort because there was no choice. But his silence was not submission. It was self-preservation. The family was treading water in a sea of monsters. And they were sinking. The forest. When Harry Potter offered himself to Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, it was Narcissa who was chosen to confirm the kill. She stepped forward alone. Past giants. Past Death Eaters. Past Bellatrix, who burned with the kind of loyalty Narcissa had long abandoned. Harry lay limp on the ground, hit with the killing curse, but alive. Barely. She leaned in. Her hand touched his chest. Her pale hair brushed his face. And then, softly, she asked, "Is Draco alive?" In those 4 words, the war stopped. She didn't ask about victory. She didn't ask about Voldemort. She asked about her son. And when Harry whispered yes, she turned. "He is dead," she said aloud. The lie was perfect. Calm. Controlled. And it saved everything. The lie heard around the world. It was not the killing curse that undid Voldemort, it was the trust Narcissa betrayed. Because in that lie, she protected Harry, ensured the final battle could take place, and allowed her family to step away from the fire. She did not do it for the Order. She did not do it for morality. She did it for Draco. For family. For escape. When she returned to Voldemort's side, she held her husband's hand for the first time in weeks. When they entered the ruins of Hogwarts behind the Death Eaters, their eyes searched not for their Dark Lord, but for their son. And when the fighting resumed, they did not join it. They stood aside, distant, observers in a war they no longer believed in. The end of the Malfoy War. As Voldemort fell, as Bellatrix died, as the Great Hall filled with cries and spells and blood, the Malfoys did not fight or flee. They simply left. No one stopped them. No one wanted to. The war had ended, and so had their role in it. They were no longer aristocrats. No longer allies. No longer enemies. They were exiles, walking away from the battlefield as something new. Something uncertain. Something human. The lie that saved them. After the war, the Ministry chose not to prosecute Narcissa. Her lie had saved Harry Potter, and with him, the entire wizarding world. No law existed to reward such a thing. But no prosecutor dared ignore it. Lucius was spared Azkaban. Draco was allowed to return home. The Malfoy fortune was untouched, though the family's name carried a weight it never had before: shame. But shame was survivable. Because they had survived. And in the center of that survival, wrapped in silk and silence, stood Narcissa Malfoy, the woman who had saved her son, and in doing so, saved them all. The fall of House Malfoy. When the war ended, the world exhaled. The Dark Lord was dead. His followers scattered. Hogwarts, though battered, still stood. But for the House of Malfoy, there was no victory. Only vacancy. What was once a dynasty of dominance became something hollow. A name without allies. A manor without meaning. A family without standing. The Malfoys had survived, but they had not won. The New Order. In the days following Voldemort's fall, Lucius Malfoy sat before Ministry officials, not as a master of political games, but as a man undone. He offered no defiance. No clever defense. Only silence. His old tactics, money, influence, ancestral pride, carried no weight in a ministry that had seen what Malfoy gold had funded, what Malfoy silence had cost. But in the end, he was not imprisoned. He was spared not by law, but by technicality, fatigue, and the subtle understanding that the Malfoys were no longer a threat. They were irrelevant. Narcissa's lie had earned quiet favor. Draco's inaction had kept his hands cleaner than most. And Lucius, once a giant of the old wizarding elite, was now a relic of a world the new regime no longer feared. The return to the manor. They returned to Malfoy Manor, but it did not feel like home. The drawing room where Voldemort had tortured dissenters still echoed with screams. The corridors were lined with portraits that now watched with disapproval, as if sensing the shift in power. The house elves avoided Lucius. Even the peacocks on the lawn seemed quieter. For the first time in generations, no one came to visit. The invitation stopped. The 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑 offered no position. Their donations were returned unopened. And where once the name Malfoy commanded doors to swing open, it now made them quietly shut. They were untouched, but uninvited. A punishment far more cruel to a family obsessed with legacy than prison ever could be. Lucius, the hollow throne. Lucius deteriorated. No longer the serpent behind the curtain, he drifted through the halls like a man haunted by a war he lost twice, once with the Dark Lord, and again with history. He spent long hours in the study, rereading old laws, leafing through letters from a ministry that no longer replied. He drank more. Spoke less. At times, even Draco avoided him. The once proud head of the family had become its ghost. Narcissa, the quiet matriarch. Narcissa, by contrast, endured. She did not speak of the war. She did not explain her lie. But she took control of what remained: household affairs, financial holdings, Draco's reintroduction into society. Her focus was preservation. Not of pride. Not of influence. But of stability. Survival. She understood that the world had changed, and if the Malfoys were to survive it, they would need to change too. Silently, she began cutting ties with the remaining pureblood fanatics. She rejected correspondence from old Death Eater families. She sold off cursed artifacts. She paid quiet reparations to a few victims, though none were ever publicized. She would not rebuild the Malfoys' reputation. But she would keep them safe. Draco, a son between worlds. For Draco, the post-war years were the most difficult of all. He was no longer a boy. But he was not yet a man. He had not cast unforgivable curses. But he had watched others do so. He had not killed. But he had let others die. He had failed. But in failing, perhaps, he had begun to break free. He kept to himself. Declined job offers. Avoided the profit. He wandered the grounds of the manor like a man unsure if the soil beneath his feet still belonged to him. He had been raised to be proud. But now, he was ashamed. And in that shame, something new began to form, self-awareness. He no longer believed in blood purity. Not because someone had convinced him otherwise, but because he had seen where it led. Not to glory, but to graves. A new silence. By the time the wizarding world returned to normalcy, the Malfoys had vanished from its spotlight. Their wealth remained, but their voice did not. Their name still echoed, but only in history books, courtroom transcripts, and whispered warnings to new generations. They had not fallen from grace. They had fallen from fear, and without it, the House of Malfoy was no longer a power. It was a shadow. A silver statue in a world painted in new colors. And though the bloodline endured, the age of Malfoy dominance had ended. Not with fire. Not with trial. But with silence. A green grass union. In the quiet aftermath of war, while the wizarding world reshaped itself with cautious optimism, Draco Mal. Or important, the beginning of redemption. The green grass line. The green grasses were a quiet pureblood family, old, wealthy, and impeccably mannered, but never loud. They had never aligned with Voldemort, nor spoken against him. They preferred privacy to politics, civility to ideology. Astoria was the younger daughter of the house, born just a year below Draco at Hogwarts. She had been sorted into Slytherin, but unlike many in her house, she had no hunger for dominance. She observed. She listened. And beneath her soft gaze was a mind as sharp as a silver dagger. After the war, their paths crossed again, first at formal events, then in quieter spaces, the back row of a memorial service, the edge of an apothecary, a shaded bench at a ministry archive Draco rarely visited. Where others looked at him and saw a former Death Eater's son, Astoria saw something else, regret, perhaps. Or the chance for something different. Draco was not used to being seen as a man, not a name. And she saw him. The courtship. Their courtship was slow, almost awkward. Draco, trained his whole life in confidence, now second-guessed his every word. Astoria, raised to mistrust the theatrics of old bloodlines, watched him with careful curiosity. They met in public, but spoke in private. They walked together along the Wiltshire hills but never through the manor's doors, at least not until much later. Their conversations weren't about the war. They were about what came after. Astoria asked Draco what he wanted to build, not what he had inherited. She challenged his view of the world, not through confrontation, but through calm. And in time, Draco found himself pulled not by tradition, but by possibility. A marriage without ceremony. When they married, there was no grand announcement. No Daily Prophet headline. No golden invitation sent to the sacred 28. The ceremony was small. Only a handful of guests. No press. No peacocks. Narcissa wore grey. Lucius did not speak. But Draco, for the first time in years, smiled without calculation. Astoria did not marry him to elevate her name. He did not marry her to restore his. They married because, in a world where everything had been divided by blood, war, and name, they had chosen each other. It was the first time a Malfoy had done so freely. A private life. Their life together was simple, by pure blood standards. They lived quietly at a smaller estate near the coast, far from the manor's echoing halls. Draco rarely visited Diagon Alley. Astoria devoted herself to healing magic and botanical work. They hosted no galas. They appeared at no press events. They chose peace. But peace did not come without sacrifice. Astoria had inherited a blood curse, a condition that weakened her health over time. It had claimed women in her family for generations. There were no potions to fix it. No charms to reverse it. Just time measured in years, then in months. And yet, she never complained. She chose joy where she could. Love when it was offered. And when Draco worried, she only smiled. "You've already given me a life worth living," she once told him. Scorpius. Their son was born Scorpius Malfoy, a boy wrapped in layers of history and hope. Draco held him with hands that had once trembled at the thought of legacy, now steady with something else, devotion. He vowed never to raise Scorpius as he had been raised, not with pressure, not with purity, not with pride sharpened into prejudice. He would be taught compassion, taught to question, taught to stand apart if needed. Astoria insisted he read to him every night, even when Scorpius couldn't understand the words. Draco chose books about stars, about wand lore, about brave boys who made their own names. Scorpius grew quiet like his mother, curious like his father. And in him, the Malfoy name found something it had never known before. Grace. A different legacy. Astoria's health faded over the years. Gently, then all at once. She passed before Scorpius began his first year at Hogwarts. She asked only one thing of Draco before she died. "Don't let him carry your name like a chain. Let it be wings." He buried her beneath a magnolia tree. No plaque. No spell. Just a white blossom that never wilted, enchanted to bloom every year on the day they met. And from that day forward, Draco Malfoy lived not as the heir to a fallen house, but as the father of a boy he wanted the world to love freely. Raising Scorpius. When Scorpius Malfoy was born, he did not just inherit the blood of two ancient families, he inherited the burden of their choices. A name shaped by war, whispered in scandal, and feared in memory. But to Draco, he was never a symbol. He was simply his son. And Draco was determined that Scorpius would be free. A new kind of father. Draco had been raised on lineage and legacy, trained to carry the Malfoy name like a weapon. There had been no softness, no room for hesitation. But now, standing in the quiet of a coastal home, a child in his arms and the weight of history behind him, Draco vowed to break the cycle. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand obedience. He taught Scorpius not what to think, but how to think for himself. They read books together, about astronomy, wand lore, the founding of Hogwarts. Draco answered every question, even the hard ones. Was grandfather really a bad man? Did we help the bad side? And Draco, who had once been a boy too proud to admit fear, told his son the truth. Not to shame him, but to protect him from ignorance. "We made mistakes," he said. "We followed people who should never have been followed. But you don't have to repeat anything." Draco never forced Scorpius to become a Malfoy in the old sense. He wanted him to become something better. Something new. The weight of a name. But the world did not forget. When Scorpius began visiting Diagon Alley with his father, whispers followed them. "Malfoy's boy. Watch him. Isn't he?" Even as a child, Scorpius understood he was being watched, not for who he was, but for who he came from. Draco protected him where he could, but even magic had limits. prejudice could not be hexed away. When rumors spread through the wizarding world that Scorpius might be Voldemort's son, Draco was furious. The gossip had no basis. But it lived, persistent, ugly, and cruel. Scorpius, always sensitive, withdrew. He began to fear his name. To see it not as a crest, but a curse. Draco realized the only way forward was to face the past directly. So he did something no Malfoy had ever done. He opened the family archive. He showed Scorpius the real records, the court transcripts, the letters, the family tree. He explained what had happened, how it had gone wrong, and where it had nearly destroyed them all. He let his son carry the truth, not the myth. And in doing so, the boy began to stand straighter. The train to Hogwarts. When the time came for Scorpius to leave for his first year at Hogwarts, Draco stood on platform 9 3/4, memories clawing at the edges of his thoughts. He remembered his own first day. The arrogance. The expectations. The warnings from his father. But he said none of that to Scorpius. Instead, he knelt to his son's level and said, "Be kind. Be curious. And choose your friends for who they are, and not for who anyone says they should be." He hugged him. Genuinely. Without pride. Without fear. And watched him board the train, not as a Malfoy heir, but as a boy with a clean slate. Sorting and friendship? When the sorting hat called out Slytherin, Draco felt both relief and concern. He had worried his son would be mocked by his peers, feared by the professors, isolated by the whispers. But Scorpius surprised him. He did not chase power. He did not lead. He befriended. His closest companion became Albus Severus Potter, son of the very man Draco had once despised, rivaled, and envied. Their friendship was genuine, bonded not by family name, but by shared pressure and quiet strength. They were opposites, yet inseparable. Draco, upon learning this, simply nodded. "Good," he said. "Let the next generation fix what we broke." The father in the shadows. Draco rarely visited Hogwarts. He stayed out of politics, out of newspapers. He chose to let Scorpius write his own story. But he watched. Quietly. Proudly. And when Scorpius came home for holidays, full of stories about spells and classes and his friend Albus, Draco listened. Not as a lord to a future heir, but as a father, deeply grateful that somehow, after everything, his son had found something Draco never truly had. Belonging. Malfoys and time travel, cursed child. Though the scars of war had faded from headlines and the Malfoy name no longer stirred the Ministry's fear, the past had never truly loosened its grip. It lived in whispers, in rumors, in the cautious glances cast toward the son of a Death Eater and the grandson of Voldemort's fallen allies. And for Scorpius Malfoy, it lived in something worse, loneliness. In the shadow of Hogwarts, despite his warmth and curiosity, he remained a target. Other students spoke in hushed tones of impossible things, dark rumors that he was the child of Lord Voldemort himself, born from some twisted pact through time. And though it was absurd, Scorpius could feel it sticking to him. Like soot on a white shirt. Like the family name he could never outrun. And then time offered him a temptation. A forbidden object. It began with a time turner, an illegal magical device thought destroyed after the Department of Mysteries raid. But one had survived. Hidden. Forgotten. Then found again. Scorpius and Albus Potter, best friends and quiet rebels in their own right, learned of it through a grieving cousin and an impossible idea: use it to save Cedric Diggory, the boy who died in the Triwizard Tournament. A boy whose death had helped spiral the wizarding world into war. Their goal was noble. Their means were disastrous. They traveled back. They interfered. And with each ripple, the world changed, twisting into alternate timelines where Voldemort ruled, where Hermione never married Ron, where Harry died, and where Scorpius Malfoy stood not as a lonely student, but as a prince of darkness, feared and revered as the Scorpion King. It was fiction, but it was real enough to leave a mark. The Scorpion King. In the darkest timeline, Scorpius learned what he could have become. He ruled Hogwarts with cruelty. He upheld bloodline supremacy. He commanded others through fear. It was everything his ancestors had dreamed of, and everything he had learned to reject. When he returned to his real life, to the proper world, the echo of that false self lingered like a curse. He had seen the version of himself the world feared. The version he might have become, if not for love, friendship, and choice. He understood, now more than ever, that legacy was not destiny. It was a choice, made moment by moment. Draco's revelation. When Draco learned of what had happened, of how close they had come to destroying time itself, he did not shout. He did not scold. He understood. Because he, too, had once tried to rewrite history. Not with time, but with ambition. He had tried to fix what was broken by doing what he was told. And it had nearly cost him everything. Now, his son had tried to fix the past for good, and had nearly broken the world. But the difference was clear. Draco had followed darkness. Scorpius had rejected it. "I'm proud of you," he told his son. "Not for what you did, but for what you learned." It was a sentence Lucius had never spoken to Draco. And now it meant everything. A father's secret. What Scorpius did not know, at least not until later, was that Draco, too, had searched for a time-turner once. Not for power. Not for strategy. But to save Astoria. Draco had spent years combing through Department of Mysteries files, black market libraries, even whispered rumors in Nocturne Alley. All in the hope of turning back time, of healing the curse that took his wife. He never succeeded. But he understood better than anyone how the past could consume a man. And he never wanted that weight for his son. So when the time turner was finally destroyed, Draco helped. He did not fight to keep it. He let it burn. Because some things, painful, impossible, precious things, must stay in the past. A future worth having. In the aftermath of their journey through time, Scorpius and Albus emerged changed. Closer. Wiser. And Draco saw in their bond a quiet hope for the future, one built not on bloodline or ambition, but on empathy. Where Lucius had surrounded himself with tools, and Draco with guards, Scorpius had surrounded himself with friends. It was the clearest sign yet that the Malfoy legacy, once rooted in fear, had finally begun to heal. Not through denial of the past, but through courage in the present. The Elder Wand and the Unintended Master. In the legends of wizardkind, few objects carry a name spoken with such caution, awe, and dread as the Elder Wand. Crafted from elder wood, core of thestral tail hair, and said to be death's own creation, it passed through blood, betrayal, and centuries of bloodshed. Most who sought it did so for power. But Draco Malfoy, unknowingly, once held mastery over it, not through conquest, but through consequence. The deathly hallows and a wand's loyalty. The Elder Wand, by the laws of magic, does not choose based on goodness or even skill. It chooses based on defeat. When one wizard disarms another, the wand's loyalty may transfer. Not to the wielder's hand, but to their magical authority. In the astronomy tower, during Draco's 6th year, he did something no one expected. He disarmed Albus Dumbledore. He didn't kill him. He didn't even cast a spell with intent to harm. But in the fragile, final seconds before Dumbledore's death, Draco took his wand. It was enough. In that moment, without knowing, Draco Malfoy became the master of the Elder Wand. When Severus Snape cast the fatal spell, it was too late, the wand had already shifted allegiance. And when Harry Potter later disarmed Draco in Malfoy Manor, the ownership passed again, not from Voldemort, but from Draco to Harry. None of them fully understood it at the time. But magic did. The power he never wielded. Draco would later reflect on the irony of it. He had possessed mastery over the most powerful wand in history. And he had never used it. No spells. No duels. No thirst for power. Just one moment of fear and desperation, and the wand bowed its allegiance to a boy too afraid to cast the final curse. For all the Malfoy legacy had chased ancient relics, bloodline superiority, and magical control, it was inaction, hesitation, mercy, that had earned Draco something his ancestors would have killed for. And he gave it up without even realizing it. It never truly belonged to me, he would one day say. And I think that's why it never corrupted me. Because to wield the Elder Wand is one thing. To walk away from it is something greater. Voldemort's mistake. Voldemort, obsessed with domination, misunderstood the wand's true allegiance. He believed killing Snape would claim it. But the wand resisted him, rejected him, and ultimately betrayed him, because its last true master was Harry. And before that, Draco. This quiet link, this barely remembered moment in the shadows of the Astronomy Tower, helped seal the Dark Lord's doom. And Draco, unaware, had played a silent role in the ending of an era. It was, in a way, the perfect mirror of his character. A boy once destined to serve darkness, whose greatest contribution to the light was hesitation. The heir of the wandless legacy. Years later, as Scorpius asked questions about the Hallows, about wand lore, and the war, Draco told him everything. He did not romanticize it. He did not make himself the hero. But he did explain the truth, that power does not always belong to the one who holds the wand, but to the one who chooses when not to use it. Scorpius listened in silence. And for the first time, the boy who had once feared his name understood that his father, so often painted as villain, rival, or coward, had done something neither celebrated nor condemned. He had let go. He had let go of the Elder Wand, of revenge, of the darkness offered to him. And in doing so, he had changed the story of the Malfoys. Not with a flourish of magic, but with the simple, painful choice of restraint. The quiet rebuilding. The wars were over. The Death Eaters were gone. The Dark Lord was a memory, his name no longer feared but taught in classrooms. And the Malfoys, for the first time in living memory, stood outside the circle of power. There was no grand trial. No public condemnation. But there was also no forgiveness. And so, the rebuilding began, not with stone or gold, but with silence, with time, and with intention. The return to Wiltshire. Malfoy Manor still stood, untouched in body but wounded in spirit. The walls whispered. The portraits watched with narrowed eyes. Lucius wandered its corridors in quiet defeat. Narcissa resumed her role as steward of the estate. But it was Draco who bore the invisible burden of restoration. He did not seek to restore the family's glory. He sought to restore its humanity. The house was disenchanted, room by room. Old traps and curses were removed. The East Wing, long sealed off and rumored to contain relics of the darkest kind, was emptied and repurposed into a library. Draco personally supervised the relocation of dozens of magical artifacts, some donated to the ministry, others destroyed entirely. The Malfoys, who once collected power, began to collect quiet. A life out of the public eye. Draco did not return to politics. He did not join the 𝑺𝒍𝒆𝒆𝒑. He declined invitations to lecture on wand lore or bloodline studies. Instead, he focused on alchemy, on magical theory, and on fatherhood. His name remained in the prophet only when necessary, once to speak at a memorial for fallen Hogwarts students, once to publicly support a bill protecting Muggle-born inheritance rights. He did not speak often. But when he did, people listened, if only out of curiosity that a Malfoy could speak without venom. And gradually, the wizarding world began to adjust. They did not embrace him, but they stopped fearing him. And that was enough. The study and the garden. Draco's study became the new heart of the manor. Gone were the black banners, the family grimoires, and the walls lined with wand racks. In their place, parchment, potion books, diagrams of magical fields, and photographs of Scorpius growing older. Outside, the once purely decorative gardens were transformed. Astoria's favorite plants bloomed beneath enchanted trellises. A small greenhouse was built to study magical herbs. House elves were offered clothing and contracts. Some chose to stay. Some chose to leave. Draco respected both. He was no longer a master. He was a caretaker, reconciling with the past. Lucius never fully recovered. He remained bitter, paranoid, and withdrawn, clinging to the last shreds of the world he once ruled. But Narcissa adapted. She spent long afternoons walking the grounds with Scorpius, telling him stories, not of war or legacy, but of laughter, childhood, and small acts of courage. Draco watched his mother with a new kind of admiration. She, too, had changed. And that gave him hope. Still, the past could not be erased. Visitors remained rare. 𝒍𝒆𝒑 would catch a glimpse of himself in the mirror, pale hair, grey eyes, posture still sharp from years of training. But he no longer looked like Lucius. He no longer looked like a boy trying to become a man. He looked like something new, something the Malfoy family had never been before. He looked like a father who had chosen to stay. He looked like a man still learning, still atoning, still rebuilding. A house divided. To the outside world, the Malfoy name was a relic, polished in money, tarnished in memory. But inside Malfoy Manor, the fractures ran deeper than reputation. They ran through blood. Through fathers and sons. Through expectations unmet and sins unrepented. Because while Draco worked to rebuild, Lucius still clung to the past. And the house, though grand in stone, was divided in spirit. The rift between generations. Lucius Malfoy had once ruled by proximity to power. Even when Voldemort overtook the manor, Lucius had still held status, if not control. But now, his name, once spoken in ministry halls and Death Eater meetings, meant little. His gold remained, but his influence was gone. And he could not let it go. He watched Draco raise Scorpius with compassion. He heard the boy speak freely of half-blood friends and Muggle studies. He saw the house elves paid and thanked. And he resented it. The world does not thank us for being soft, he once told Draco. Our name commands respect. You squander it. Draco responded with silence. Not because he lacked an answer, but because he had grown beyond the argument. Lucius viewed kindness as weakness. But Draco had learned that compassion, like restraint, was a form of strength his father could never wield. Narcissa in the middle. Narcissa, ever the quiet force, moved between them like a shadow with purpose. She no longer defended Lucius as she once had. But she did not abandon him either. She saw his bitterness for what it was, a man who had bet his legacy on the wrong future, and lost. Still, she pressed him to change, to recognize his grandson's goodness, to soften toward the life they now led. At times, she succeeded. Lucius would sit in the garden beside Scorpius, offering stories from his youth, lessons on etiquette, theory, even wand care. But it never lasted. The old instincts always returned, the disapproval of Scorpius's humility, the discomfort with Draco's modesty, the slow-burning frustration that the Malfoys were no longer feared. Scorpius caught between names. Scorpius loved his grandfather in the confused way all children love those who are supposed to love them. Lucius was not cruel to him. But he was unkind in the ways that left marks invisible, the lifted eyebrow at a compassionate opinion, the scoff when he praised Muggle innovations, the silence when Scorpius mentioned Albus Potter. He didn't forbid. He didn't punish. He just reminded the boy, in 100 small ways, what he was supposed to be. And Scorpius, torn between the warmth of his father and the shadow of his grandfather, began to understand that a name could mean different things in different mouths. He began to form his own meaning. And that, if more than anything, terrified Lucius. Draco's final word. One evening, after a tense dinner in which Lucius derided Scorpius's interest in Muggle science, Draco stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply said, "If you cannot accept who he is becoming, you will lose us both." It was not a punishment. It was a boundary. And for the first time in his life, Lucius found himself on the other side of a line he could not cross without change. He said nothing. But from that day forward, he kept more to himself. He no longer offered guidance unless asked. He walked the estate less frequently. The great patriarch of the Malfoy line had become a spectator to its future. And he knew it. A new Malfoy definition. Draco did not erase the past. He did not change the family crest or disown the name. But he reshaped its meaning, not through proclamation, but through example. Scorpius was taught that Malfoy once meant pride, purity, and preservation. Now it meant resilience, honesty, and quiet strength. Lucius remained, aging and diminished, holding on to the last embers of a world that no longer bowed to him. But Draco stood tall. Not as a boy desperate for approval. Not as a son chasing shadows. But as a man who had built a new house within the old walls. One where his son could grow freely. Even if it meant the father before him could not follow. What makes a Malfoy? For centuries, the question would have had only one answer: a Malfoy is pure-blooded, wealthy, respected, and feared. But now, decades after war, shame, and silence, the question lingered again. Asked not by newspapers or courts, but by a son to his father. And Draco Malfoy, once so certain of his inheritance, now stood before the mirror of his legacy and quietly asked himself, what makes a Malfoy? A name in transition. The wizarding world no longer flinched at the name Malfoy, but neither did it applaud it. Shopkeepers no longer whispered. Aurors no longer watched. But the corridors of the ministry still fell silent when Draco passed through. At Hogwarts, the surname still caused eyebrows to raise. And Scorpius, growing into adolescence, felt it most of all. He was called names his father had once used. He was judged for blood he never chose. He was seen, not for who he was, but who he wasn't allowed to be. And one day, in a moment of rare frustration, he asked Draco, "Why didn't you just change our name?" Draco paused. He looked at his son, the soft features, the steady eyes, the quiet ache to be free. And he said, "Because the world already knows it. And I'd rather teach them a new meaning than pretend it never mattered." Blood vs. Bond. The Malfoy name had once been synonymous with purity, an obsession with lineage, unmarred by Muggle blood, unbent by humility. But Draco had long since abandoned that illusion. When Scorpius brought home friends of all backgrounds, Draco welcomed them. When he expressed interest in Muggle culture, Draco learned with him. When he wrote essays defending the rights of magical creatures, Draco helped him edit them. Because blood did not bind people, bond did. And Draco knew better than most that blood alone meant nothing without choices to give it meaning. He began to write, quietly, under a pseudonym, essays on legacy, on redemption, on inherited guilt. Not to justify, not to excuse, but to explore. He didn't publish them. Not yet. But he wrote them for Scorpius, so that one day, his son could see in print what kind of man his father had become. The legacy of choice. The older Draco grew, the more he understood that choice, not ancestry, is what defines a wizard. He had once chosen cruelty, then hesitation, then mercy, and finally, he had chosen love. Love for a wife who changed him. Love for a son who saved him. Love for a future that would not be ruled by fear. He no longer believed in destiny. He believed in correction. In deliberate, daily effort. In not becoming what he had once been raised to idolize. Conversations with a portrait. In the East Wing, where the family portraits were slowly being moved to less prominent walls, Lucius's painted likeness still hung, cold-eyed, stern, silent. Sometimes Draco stood before it. Not to argue, but to reflect. He would look into those painted eyes and think about what his father had given him. Wealth, discipline, power, and pain. And he would whisper, "You were wrong. But I still understand you." Because Draco did not hate Lucius. He pitied him, a man who had never been free of the cage he helped build. And Draco had made certain Scorpius would never step into it. What makes a Malfoy? Is it blood? Is it gold? Is it the name stitched on a robe or etched into silver? No. A Malfoy, now, was something different. A Malfoy is a man who carries the weight of his past, and chooses not to pass it on. A Malfoy is a boy who bears a name with a painful history, and still walks with his head held high. A Malfoy is not perfect. He is not feared. He is learning. And that, at last, was enough. Silver blood, golden heart. The name Malfoy was once spoken with awe. Then with hatred. Then with silence. But in time, it came to mean something else, something quieter, something stronger. It meant a legacy not of conquest or purity, but of change. Not of dominance, but of growth. The Malfoy line had not been extinguished. It had been transformed. A new kind of heir. Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy, now older, stood in the gardens of the manor where generations of his family had made decisions that shaped, or shattered, the wizarding world. But he was not wearing embroidered robes. He did not carry himself with arrogance. His wand was holly and unicorn hair, not yew or dragon heartstring. He was, in many ways, the anti-Malfoy. And yet, he had inherited the name fully, proudly, peacefully. He had friends across houses. He was known at Hogwarts not for his name, but for his kindness. He was loved not for who his father was, but for who he chose to become. And Draco, watching from the window of the study, felt something he had never known as a child. Peace. A father's victory. Draco had not sought redemption. He had not demanded forgiveness. But he had earned peace, one day, one decision at a time. He had raised a child with freedom. He had spoken truth, even when it hurt. He had carried a name that once brought death, and used it to teach life. He still bore scars. Still had dreams where the dark mark burned. Still remembered the day he nearly took a life that would have destroyed his own. But he had lived beyond it. And now, as Scorpius turned to wave at him from across the lawn, Draco nodded. "You are my legacy," he whispered. Not the manor. Not the crest. Not the fortune or the name. Him. The last conversation. Lucius died quietly, years later. His portrait now hangs in a far corner of the house, gazing into the distance. He is not often visited. But on the night of his passing, Draco sat in the study alone, holding a single letter his father had written before the end. It said little. But it said enough. You made choices I never could. I did not understand you. But I am glad I lived long enough to see you become something better. It was not an apology. But it was honesty. And that, in the Malfoy family, was rare enough to be sacred. A new meaning. The world would never forget what the Malfoy name had once meant. But it would also remember what it had become. It would remember the boy who didn't kill. The woman who lied to save the world. The man who let go of the Elder Wand. The child who bore a name with grace instead of pride. And it would understand that some legacies are not buried or erased. They are rewritten. Silver blood, golden heart. The Malfoy still wore silver. Still spoke with Polish. Still moved through the world with quiet precision. But the heart of the house, once ruled by power and fear, are now pulsed with something else. Love. Forgiveness. Choice. The blood remained. But the heart had changed. Forever. And now, as the last echoes fade from Malfoy Manor's long corridors, as the candles burn low in the drawing room, and as your thoughts drift like parchment in a soft breeze. You've traveled far, dear listener. Farther than most would dare. You've walked with the very first Malfoy, watched as power was bought, traded, and lost, stood beside Narcissa as she whispered a lie that saved the world, and saw Draco Malfoy, once cold and cruel, choose a gentler legacy for his son. You've seen portraits sneer from ancient walls. You've heard the weight of names carried like chains, and you've watched those chains quietly fall away. Tonight, you learned that a family once defined by fear could be remembered, instead, for change. That blood may be inherited, but character is chosen. That even the darkest halls can be rebuilt, not with magic, but with forgiveness, truth, and the courage to raise a better child than you were. You now know what few in the wizarding world ever stopped to wonder. Not what made Draco Malfoy dangerous, but what made him different. And what made his son free. Pause, let the moment settle. If you made it this far into the story, you are exactly the kind of soul this channel was created for. Thoughtful. Curious. Patient. Maybe let us know in the comments what chapter stayed with you. Or just whisper a little "I'm still here" into the dark. We'll hear you. And if you're not ready for sleep just yet, you don't have to go. There's another story waiting, maybe about the Black family. Or the secrets in the Hogwarts kitchens, or the owls who watch from the tallest towers. Stay. Drift. Let the magic carry you just a little further. Good night, dear listener. And remember, even silver blood can carry a golden heart. Oh, you're still awake? That's all right. Some stories just don't want to end. They settle in behind your eyes, wander down your spine, and ask for just a few more moments. And since you're still here, how about I tell you a few more? Not Malfoy history this time. No courtrooms, no house politics. These are quieter stories. Stranger ones. Stories I wrote just for this channel, for the listeners who don't fall asleep right away. For the ones who like to stay behind after the credits roll. What you're about to hear next is a trilogy of original Harry Potter-inspired bedtime stories. Whispered in soft tones. Built from lost corridors, fading spells, and magical places that have slipped through time. They're not about Harry. Not really. They're about memory, about identity, about the kind of magic that waits in silence until someone is finally quiet enough to hear it. The first is called the Silent Wandmaker. It follows a student with no house, no wand, and no memory of ever being sorted. They stumble upon a hidden wand shop tucked beyond Diagon Alley, one that no longer sells wands, but seems to remember them anyway. The feathers inside whisper, the wood creaks like it's trying to speak, and as the student listens, a forgotten truth begins to resurface. A story long erased starts to write itself again. Then we'll move into the Echo Archive. Deep beneath Hogwarts, beyond even the catacombs, there's a secret library. Not one of books, but one of memories. Unspoken spells, unfinished names, and forgotten legacies sleep there. And when the student becomes its keeper, the archive begins to respond. Slowly. Curiously. Like a creature waking up after centuries in the dark. Inside this library, the magic predates wands. And some stories refuse to be forgotten. And finally, we arrive at the name beneath the ink. The archive opens one last door, a blank book that won't hold any writing. A visitor without a name. And a single question: what would you give up to be remembered? As memory magic starts to unravel, the student must decide whether to preserve the stories of others, or become one themselves. These are soft stories. Deep ones. Told slowly, deliberately, with space to fall asleep between the lines. So stay where you are. You don't need to open your eyes. The first of the three is about to begin. And when it does, just follow the sound of the wands whispering. They've been waiting for you.
So lie back. Let the blankets pull you in like an invisibility cloak. Let your breathing slow with every whispered word. Because this story, this one belongs only to you. And the wand remembers. You don't remember how you found the letter. Only that it was there, resting on your pillow as if it had always belonged. There's no name. Not yours. Not anyone's. Just a swirl of shimmer ink that hums gently when you tilt it toward the window. You hold it for a long time, long enough for morning to shift into noon, then slip quietly into dusk. And only then do you open it. Inside, one line. The wand remembers. The parchment folds itself the moment you read it, crisp edges melting into curls. You blink, and it's gone. But the hum remains, soft behind your ears, like something breathing through the bricks. You follow it. Through rain-slicked alleyways and crooked lamplight. Past the parts of Diagon Alley no one maps. Past Ollivanders, even. Past the curve where the cobblestones forget their shape. You walk until your shoes whisper across dust instead of stone. Until you're quite certain you've stepped somewhere the ministry forgot. That's when you see it. A shop that doesn't sit, but leans. Half submerged in shadow. Its windows are clouded from the inside, glowing faintly like old candle wax. There's no sign. No bell. No trace of life but a soft flicker deep within. You reach for the doorknob. It opens before your fingers touch it. Inside, it's warmer than it should be. Not hot, no, not heat like fire. But warmth like memory. Familiar. Distant. Sad. The room is long, narrow, and lined with shelves, all filled with things that seem too old to still be alive. Wand cores suspended in glass, twisted branches that pulse faintly under cloth, feathers that drift though no wind stirs them. There's a smell, cedar, smoke, and something sweet like burned sugar. You're not sure why it makes your eyes sting. A man stands behind a counter, though you didn't hear him enter. He's tall. Very still. And his eyes don't blink. Not once. You're late, he says softly, as though afraid of the shelves. You open your mouth to speak, but nothing comes. The man tilts his head, not confused, not impatient, just listening. You don't remember. That's all right. He leans forward, and you notice his robes are stitched with constellations that shift as he moves. You've never had a wand, have you? You shake your head. But you've heard them. He gestures behind you. You turn. The wands are whispering. It's not speech, not exactly, just murmurs. Like leaves dragged across tile, like wind in hollow places. Each wand on its shelf hums faintly, some so softly you feel them more than hear them. One seems to click like a clock. Another thrums like a cello string. But none move. They're all waiting. You're not like the others, the wand maker says. You never were. Not quite muggle. Not quite wizard. Something slipped through the cracks, and you with it. You want to ask what that means. But the words stay curled in your throat. He doesn't seem to mind. You were supposed to come here years ago. Before Hogwarts. Before the sorting. He walks to a drawer and opens it with a sound like sighing. But the moment passed. And then your name disappeared. Your name. You realize, suddenly, that you can't recall it. Not clearly. You remember sounds. Maybe someone once called you something. A pet name. A nickname. But your true name? It slips away when you try to grab it. Like smoke. The wand maker places something on the counter. A feather. It's curled, not whole. Cracked down the spine, as if once burned and then frozen. It hums with a light that doesn't reach the edges of the room. You were meant for this. This core. This path. But something interfered. You don't ask what. Not yet. Instead, you take the feather. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel the weight of a memory. Not a thought, not a picture. A weight. Something pressing on your chest. A corridor lined with torches. A sorting hat hesitating. And then, nothing. The memory slips away, and the wand maker nods. You'll need wood. And something older. Something forgotten. You ask, finally, your voice hoarse as if unused for years, what is this place? He smiles. Not warmly. Not cruelly. Just knowingly. This is the place for those who were never quite found. And then the candlelight dims. The whispers fade. And you realize the shop has no doors anymore. No windows. No ceiling. Just shelves. Endless shelves. And the feeling that something important has only just begun. You cradle the feather as if it might break. Or wake. In the distance, you hear a wand call your name. But you still don't know what it is. The feather never leaves your pocket now. You don't remember putting it there, but it's always with you. When you wake. When you walk. When you think of nothing at all. It shifts gently against your ribs like a heartbeat that isn't yours. You return to the shop every day, though you're never quite sure how. The streets change behind you. Cobblestones reappear where they weren't. Windows blink closed. Even the sun forgets which way to rise. But the door always finds you when you're ready, not when you want. The wand maker is waiting. He never moves. He never speaks unless you ask. He doesn't eat or drink, and he never blinks, not even once. But his presence wraps around the shells like a spell too old to name. Today, he speaks first. It's time, he says, and your breath catches like a dropped coin. You need wood. But not from here. Not from the surface. He gestures toward the far wall, no door, no curtain, only a ripple in the wood grain that hadn't been there yesterday. You step through. It's darker than it should be. Damp. The air tastes of stone and moss and metal, and your boots crunch against old coins that never made it to vaults. You are beneath Gringotts. Far beneath. The tunnels curve like ribs. Some glow faintly with goblin-forged runes. Others are stitched shut with silver wire, humming with words you dare not touch. You walk past vaults older than Hogwarts, past safes shaped like teeth, past statues that turn their heads when you don't look at them directly. And then, without warning, you're not alone. A figure stands in the path ahead. No footsteps. No greeting. They wear grey, and their faces covered in silk. Not hidden. Simply unfinished. Their hands move in slow shapes, not spell work, but something quieter, like words folded from silence. You don't understand. But your feet follow them anyway. The further you go, the less the world remembers itself. Your thoughts feel thinner. Your breath echoes oddly, like you're borrowing someone else's lungs. And still, the figure walks ahead, quiet as ash. Eventually, the tunnel widens. And that's when you see it. The grove. It shouldn't be possible. Trees don't grow this deep. And certainly not these trees, roots like cathedral columns, branches that shimmer with internal moonlight, bark so dark it drinks your gaze whole. But they're here. Growing from the ceiling. Their trunks curve downward like chandeliers made of life. Leaves the color of forgotten dreams sway in air that doesn't move. At the center stands the oldest tree of all, its branches tangled with bones, feathers, and strands of wand-core material long extinct. The silent figure stops beside you. You look down. Where its shadow falls, flowers bloom in reverse, closing instead of opening. You step forward, slowly. The ground beneath you is soft, not with soil but with memory. With things laid to rest. You reach for the old tree, and as your fingers brush the bark, it exhales. A long, slow breath you feel in your ribs. It speaks, not in words, but in knowing. You were one of us. You don't know what that means, but the grief in the thought nearly brings you to your knees. You press your forehead to the trunk and feel your wandless years fall away. You remember the sorting hat again. Not the ceremony, but the hesitation. How it trembled when it touched you. How it whispered, "Oh, you're not finished, are you?" And then it refused. The tree trembles. A knot opens in the wood. Inside, a strand of something impossibly fine, gleaming with warmth and weight and memory. Not a unicorn hair. Not a phoenix feather. A memory. Your memory. You take it. And it knows you. For the first time, something in this world knows you completely. The wood closes behind it, as if sealing a secret that was only ever meant for you. When you turn around, the figure is gone. And the tunnel has changed. You walk back through corridors that now recognize your scent, your pace, your quiet. The statues no longer turn. The vault sigh as you pass, as though relieved. When you emerge into the open world again, you realize no time has passed at all. Your feather hums. Your memory core glows. And in your hand, you now carry a piece of the tree that remembered your name when no one else could. Back in the wandmaker's shop, the lights are dimmer. Or perhaps your eyes have simply adjusted to a different kind of dark. You walk slower now. Each breath echoes. Your steps stir the dust like old letters being opened after too many years sealed. The wandmaker waits, as always. He nods at the items in your hand, a curled feather, still warm, and the memory core that pulses softly against your palm. "You're nearly whole," he says, and something about the way he speaks makes the shells lean in. But it still needs to choose you. You ask, "The wand?" He doesn't answer. Instead, he holds out a block of wood, cold to the touch, though not dead. You can feel it resisting. A stubborn hum. Like it knows something you don't, and doesn't want to tell. You press the core into its grain. Carefully. The wandmaker watches, unmoving. The wood rejects it. Not loudly, not with a crack or a burst of sparks. But with silence. A silence that bites. The feather recoils, scorched at the tip. The memory strand dims. And your hand burns. You flinch. It leaves no mark, but you feel the echo of fire all the way to your shoulder. The wand does not want you. Or perhaps, it remembers something you don't. The wand maker says nothing. You sit in the corner of the shop as the walls whisper softly behind you. The shelves seem taller now. You can't tell if the world has grown larger or if you've simply grown smaller in its eyes. At some point, an hour, a minute, a year later, the wand maker speaks again. You need to see what was taken. You don't ask how. He's already handed you something, a shard of mirror, perfectly round. The edges are smooth as river stone. When you look into it, you see not your reflection, but a hallway. Stone walls. Floating candles. And a single door that shifts its shape as you watch. You blink. You're no longer in the shop. You're standing outside the room of requirement. The castle doesn't ask who you are. It remembers. You place your hand on the stone and close your eyes. You don't wish for a wand, or answers, or magic. You simply wish to remember. The door opens. Inside, you're sorting. But not the one you think you knew. You see yourself, young, wide-eyed, nervous. The sorting hat slides down onto your head and pauses. Then pauses longer. Its voice, warm and curious, echoes from the memory. Oh, now this is unusual. You feel the hesitation again. It's heavy. Nearly unbearable. You're not quite ready, the hat had whispered, uncertain. You're still deciding what you are. It asked you questions you couldn't understand. Who do you follow when you can't see the leader? What do you protect when the memory fades? What is loyalty when no house will claim you? It waited. But you never answered. And then the hat lifted itself away. No house. No feast. No colors or cheering. Just a forgotten corridor. And silence. You were sent back. Forgotten. Not expelled, erased. The memory stings. But then, something changes. The memory self, the younger you, turns to look at you. You meet their gaze, and they smile. You're not lost, they whisper. Just waiting. And the memory crumbles like sand. You are back in the shop. The mirror shard is gone. But something is different. The wood no longer hums with resistance. The core no longer curls away. You press them together, and this time, there's warmth. Not fire. Not pain. Something familiar. The wand maker steps forward. He doesn't speak. Just offers you the handle. You take it. The wand forms itself in your hand. Not all at once, but slowly. Like breath returning to lungs. It hums, not with power, but with recognition. It knows you. And you know, in the space between heartbeats, that it's been waiting as long as you have. As you turn it over in your hand, something flickers in your memory. A sound. A voice. A name. But it slips away again. The wand maker nods. It will return, in time. He walks to the shelves, and for the first time, he removes a wand. Dust drifts around it like mist. This was mine, he says softly. And then, without warning, he sets it down and vanishes behind the stacks. You're alone now. But not lost. The wand glows gently in your hand. The whispering shelves fall silent. And outside the door, the world has changed. You step into it. With your name still missing, but your magic at last, your own. The first time you raise the wand, it does not cast light. It casts stillness. The room, alive for so long with whispers, finally rests. The shells cease their murmuring. The feathers stop their drifting. Even the wandmaker's absence settles like dust into the corners. And the wand in your hand waits. It doesn't ask anything of you. Doesn't flash or spark or twitch in your palm. It simply is. That night, the stars seem closer. The clouds hang low, heavy with thoughts too old to fall. You drift through alleys like smoke, through shadows that part to let you pass. No one stops you. Most don't even see you. But one place does. The castle. Hogwarts. You return without announcement, without parchment, without proof. But the gate swings open before you knock. The lanterns flicker a little brighter when you pass. The portraits turn, confused, curious, but not afraid. You are not a ghost. You are not a student. You are not forgotten. You are returning. The great hall is silent in the early dawn, the sky above it pale with the suggestion of morning. You step across its stone floor barefoot, each footfall brushing dust from memories left untouched. The long tables stretch before you, the empty plates, candle stubs, the faint smell of pumpkin and old books. You pause at the sorting hat stall. It's not there. But you don't need it anymore. You climb the stairs to the 7th floor. The corridor stretches ahead, golden and still. Your wand vibrates faintly, a thread pulling you forward, not with urgency but with quiet recognition. You walk past the tapestry of trolls in ballet shoes. 3 times. Back and forth. Not wishing. Just remembering. A door appears. You enter. It's not like before. The room doesn't become a battlefield, or a forest, or a library. It doesn't try to teach you or test you. It becomes you. Stone and wood. Soft light. Feathers drifting from nowhere. Shelves of half-finished stories. A desk with one quill. A window that shows every season at once. And a mirror, not the mirror of 𝒍𝒆𝒑, but something simpler. Kinda. You look into it. This time, your reflection looks back. You don't flinch. Your hair is mussed. Your robes, wrong in some places, patched in others. Your eyes, tired, perhaps, but whole. And written across the mirror, slowly as ink finds parchment. Your name. You can't read it at first. The letters swim. But then, a flicker. A heartbeat. And there it is. Not a name you were given. The name you are. The wand hums. A spell casts itself without you speaking. Soft blue light wraps around your shoulders, not like armor, but like memory returned. You feel it all now. The missed feast. The vanished letters. The quiet birthday without an owl. The echo of magic you felt but could never name. And then, you forgive it. The world, yourself, the sorting hat, the school, the silence. All of it. The room begins to fade, gently. You leave behind nothing, because nothing is lost. Just remember differently. When you return to the halls of Hogwarts, the castle no longer tilts its gaze. It sees you. A portrait nods. A staircase pauses to let you pass. A suit of armor hums a note you recognize from a lullaby you didn't know you knew. You're not a student. You're not a professor. You're something else. A reminder. A keeper of the stories that fell between the shelves. A wand that was never snapped, only waiting to be held. You walk into the library, where Madame Pince doesn't raise an eyebrow. You find an empty page in the book of student names, tucked in the far back, behind an index that only appears for those who look. You write it. Your name. The ink does not fade. Not this time. And when you step outside again, you don't look back. The wand at your side is silent now. But you know it would speak, if you needed it to. Instead, the wind whispers for you. The ground hums where you walk. The world, both magical and not, has remembered something it once buried. You. And so, the wand rests. The whispering shells fall quiet. The dust settles in the spaces your footsteps once stirred. You come a long way. From a forgotten letter with no name, to a shop that doesn't always exist, to a wand that remembers everything, even the parts of you that the world tried to erase. You walk beneath Gringotts. You listen to trees that grow upside down. You met a version of yourself who had once been left behind, and you brought them home. Not to a house, not to a common room, but to yourself. The magic didn't come from the wand. It came from remembering who you are. And now, the world is quieter. Not empty, just full of things finally at peace. The kind of silence you only hear when the spell has worked. When the name has been written. When the lights have dimmed, and the dream doesn't have to end, because it's already part of you. So sleep now, wand bearer. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are home. Oh, you're still awake, aren't you? That's all right. Some stories linger a little longer. And if you're still with me, then I suppose I can tell you one more. It happened not long after the wand found you. Or maybe it was long before. Time moves differently when you're between the lines of magic. There's a hallway inside H. Wand, it opens. Not outward. Not inward. It folds. Yes, like paper. And inside, you find something you didn't expect. Not a vault. Not a secret. But a library. Endless, silent, glowing faintly with candlelight that floats mid-air, unmoving. And there, stacked from floor to ceiling, are books. Each one with no title. You take one down. The cover hums beneath your fingers. And inside, it's your story. Not just this story. Not just the wand maker or the feather or the name. All of it. The first time you whispered Lumos and the world answered. The first time you thought about running, but stayed. The moment you realized magic doesn't always sparkle. Sometimes, it just knows. And there are more books. Hundreds. Thousands. Other stories, waiting for names. Waiting for readers. Waiting for someone like you to find them. You sit for a while. You read one. Just one. And when you close it, the candles dim, just slightly. You feel sleep brushing at your shoulders now. That gentle, floating kind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll dream of moonstone corridors and folded doors. Of soft voices. Of shells that breath. It begins with a book. Not a spell book. Not a diary. Not anything so easily named. It's just there. Resting on your bedside table one morning, though you live alone and lock your door. The cover is soft leather, pale as candle wax. No title. No author. No dust. You lift it gently. It breathes. Not audibly. But you feel it, the faint exhale of something long unopened. The pages are blank, but they're not empty. Each one shimmers faintly beneath the surface, as if words are hiding just beneath the paper, waiting for the right reader to look. You trace your finger across the first page. And your wand hums in its holster. There's no spell. No incantation. But something begins. That evening, you return to the room of requirement, though it doesn't feel quite the same anymore. It still opens for you. It still reshapes itself at your pace. But the walls feel warmer now, like it remembers your breath. Inside, the room is small. Just a desk. A chair. And a door. Not one you've seen before. It's narrow. Curved. Its hinges shimmer like starlight caught in iron. You don't open it right away. Instead, you place the book on the desk. The surface ripples beneath it, like the desk itself is reacting, recognizing. A single word appears on the first page. Echo. You whisper it aloud, without meaning to. The door creaks open. Not all the way. Just enough for candlelight to stretch across the floor. You step through. The air inside is colder than you expect. Not chilling, just ancient. As if it hasn't moved in a very, very long time. You're not in the room of requirement anymore. You're beneath it. Stone arches stretch overhead like ribs. Runes line the walls, softly glowing in dull copper tones, pulsing in time with something. A heartbeat? A spell? A memory? Ahead, shelves. Not stacked with books, but scrolls. Memories. Bottles filled with glowing ink. Portraits that have never been hung. Threads of spells knotted into cloth. All humming. All unfinished. You found it. The Echo Archive. You don't remember being told about this place. But your wand is warm in your hand. And something inside you says this isn't your first time here. You walk the aisle slowly. Each object here is waiting. A spell half spoken. A love letter never sent. A potion ingredient that no longer exists. And then, on the far wall, you see it. A mirror. But not the mirror of Erised. No. This one doesn't show desire. It shows what was almost lost. You look into it. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, you see a version of yourself with no wand. No name. You see the version that almost remained forgotten. And beside them, behind them, something else. Not a person. Not quite. It's watching you now, from the edge of the glass. Its eyes shimmer with ink and reflection. And it speaks, not aloud, not in words, but in knowing. You took something back. Something the archive was keeping safe. The room pulses around you. Scrolls rattle. Bottles hum. Your wand tightens in your grip, as if bracing. The voice continues, softer now. If you keep remembering, others will too. The mirror fogs over. You're left alone in silence. But the book in your bag is warm now. And when you pull it out, the second page is no longer blank. It reads. Chapter 2 begins at midnight. Bring your wand. You return just before midnight. The room doesn't shift this time. It doesn't need to. The door is already there, tall and narrow, rimmed in silver, humming like a tuning fork just after it's been struck. You don't hesitate. You step through. The archive is darker tonight. Quieter. Not asleep, but something like it. The air feels heavier, like it's been holding its breath for too long. The shelves stretch taller now. Higher. And where the scrolls once floated gently in place, now they hover like icicles mid-fall, suspended by nothing but memory. You walk softly, your wand casting a dim, blue glow ahead. It flickers, not from fear, but anticipation. The space doesn't resist you. It watches. To your right, a basin carved from obsidian hums quietly. Its contents shift like water and smoke and thought, rising now and then into flickers of words in languages you've never heard. You reach toward it, and your fingertips stop just before the surface. The basin accepts your presence but offers nothing back. Not yet. Further down the aisle, the shelves narrow, crowding closer, curling in toward a small alcove you don't remember seeing before. Inside, a table, a chair, and an object wrapped in velvet the color of dried roses. You sit. You touch the cloth. It sighs against your skin. When you unfold it, what rests beneath is not a book or wand or scroll, but a key. Not metal. Not wood. Not bone. Something older. The key pulses in your palm, dim, golden, and warm. It feels like memory. Like something that used to belong to you, long before the wand maker, long before your name returned. As if this key was once part of your story, and chose to stay behind. There's no lock in sight. But the archive shifts. The shelves bend softly to the left, revealing a wall of drawers that weren't there moments before. Each one has a symbol, etched deep into the wood. Not numbers. Not letters. Shapes. Spirals. Crossed ones. A curled feather. A hand with 5 fingers and 5 eyes. You don't choose. The key does. It tugs your hand gently toward the 3rd drawer from the bottom. You insert it. The drawer opens with a sound like paper sighing after a long sleep. Inside, a stone. small, uncut, gray. You lift it carefully, and as it touches the air, you feel the archive tremble, not in anger or fear, but remembrance. Magic floods the walls like rain returning to dry roots. You see images, brief and half-formed, flickering in the corners of your sight. A young witch burning this very stone into her palm to protect her village, a wizard tearing it from the earth with a scream, a child swallowing it whole and vanishing into fog. The stone has history, and pain, and power. But most of all, it has been waiting. You set it on the table. The key vanishes. And then, the velvet cloth folds itself again, perfectly, and disappears into the dark. Something is guiding you now. Not a person. Not even a spell. Just the archive itself. It knows who you are. Not just your name, but the shape your story makes when it moves through the world. As you prepare to leave, the mirrors lining the far wall flare to life again. You see yourself, dozens of selves, each carrying something different. A wand. A lantern. A book. A heart. And one, furthest from the others, stands in complete darkness, holding nothing. It looks directly at you. Its mouth moves. You lean closer. No sound. Just breath. Just lips forming for slow, silent syllables. You are the key. Then the image vanishes. The shells fall still. And somewhere in your bag, the book you found, the one that breathes, flutters open to the next page. Blank again. Waiting. The next time you return to the archive, it feels colder. Not unpleasant, just older. More distant. Like something has remembered its age. You descend the stairwell in silence, your wand flickering low and steady at your side. It doesn't need to shine as brightly anymore. The archive recognizes you now. It has stopped asking who you are. It's begun to ask why you've come. You pass the basin again, the obsidian pool that never reflects the same image twice. Tonight, it shows flickers of something you almost recognize, a classroom, but not from any house you've known. Chalk dust in candlelight. A bell that never rang. When you blink, it's gone. Tonight, you're drawn toward the far wall, a place you haven't yet explored. The shelves there are unlike the others. They don't hold books or scrolls or bottles. They hold echoes. Not memories. Not visions. Sounds. Suspended in the air, shaped like fog in frozen motion. A laugh from a century ago. A scream caught in stasis. A lullaby still vibrating faintly, just out of tune. You reach out, and your hand brushes one. A whisper enters your ear. Not all spells need wands. Only names. You freeze. The voice was your own. But not you now, you before. Before the wand maker. Before your name returned. It echoes again, softer, and then dissolves. You take a step back. The echo shelf hums gently behind you, now quiet, as if satisfied you've heard what it needed to say. Across the room, a door has opened. You don't remember hearing it. You don't remember seeing it. But it's open. Inside is a circle. Carved into the floor, chalk white and trembling with thin, silvery light. No rooms. No words. Just a shape, 3 spirals, wound inward toward a single point. There is nothing else in the room. No shelves. No scrolls. No guardians. Only silence. And the circle. You step toward it slowly, your wand still warm in your hand. But something urges you, gently, wordlessly, to set it down. You do. The moment your wand touches the ground, the light within the circle brightens. And then fades. You step inside. The world does not spin. The air does not shift. But something recognizes you. Not with language. With presence. With weight. Your breath grows slower. Deeper. You feel it, below your ribs, behind your teeth, beneath your skin, magic awakening where your wand does not reach. A spell forms. Not from your lips. From your memory. You don't speak it. You remember it. And as the spell flows from your chest outward, you understand, this is not magic as you were taught. This is older. This is the kind of magic that predates incantation. The kind you feel, not perform. The kind the archive keeps safe because it no longer fits into books. The circle accepts it. It glows again, not silver now, but blue, soft as candlelight on parchment. The air moves. And in the center of the circle, a new shape rises. A stone plinth. On it, a box. Wooden. Ash. No hinges. No seams. You lift the lid, which wasn't there a moment ago, and inside. Another key. But this one is different. It's shaped like a feather. Soft to the touch. Warm with waiting. You tuck it into your robe and look behind you. Your wand lies where you left it. But now, it's humming. Not like before. Not recognition. Respect. The archive doesn't blink. Doesn't shift. Doesn't sigh. But something in its silence says, you've passed. Whatever that means. You leave quietly, book pressed to your chest, feather-shaped key warm against your heart. Tomorrow, the archive will open again. And next time, it may not wait for you to enter. The next morning, you find the door before it finds you. You're not in the archive. You're not even in Hogwarts. You're in the forest just beyond the castle walls, where the mist rises early and the branches don't creak, they listen. You came here without meaning to. Maybe you were walking. Maybe you were dreaming. But when the trees parted and you saw the archway tucked between two oaks, you knew. The archive has grown. The doorway stands open. Not carved from stone this time, but framed by ivy and silence. You step through, and there's no floor beneath you, just the hum of the castle's deep heart, old and slow and vast. You descend without steps. The room you enter is not lit. It is luminous. Pale threads of silver web across the air. Shells float. Candles drift. And in the center of it all, suspended above a shallow pool of mirrored water, hangs a single scroll. It glows with breath. You move toward it slowly, your wand at your side, the feather-shaped key tucked into your robes. You know it belongs here. You know you do, too. When you reach the scroll, it unrolls. Not by spell or charm, but because you're ready. The words are not written in ink. They write themselves as you read. They are your story. Not the one you lived. The one you could have. It speaks of days you never had, spells you never cast, rooms you never entered. It shows you the version of yourself that never met the wand maker. The you that remained nameless. Wandless. Faded. You ache for them. But the scroll doesn't linger. The letters fade as soon as they're read, making space for new ones. You blink. Now it's writing again. But this time, not what wasn't. What could be. You see a room, a library with no walls, only shelves that move. You see your hand restoring old spells, preserving spells thought too dangerous to remember. You see yourself guiding others like you, unsorted, misnamed, nearly forgotten, but not lost. You see the archive, growing. Becoming. You close your eyes. The key presses warm against your chest. And the scroll curls shut. You know what it's asking. Not with words. Not with prophecy. Just a gentle knowing. You can leave. Let the archive rest. Let the door close and never return. Or you can stay. You can become its keeper. Not the master of it. The memory. You walk back across the pool, not looking at your reflection. You already know what it would show. A name reclaimed. A wand earned. A life halfway between story and silence. At the door, your wand hums once. Just once. As if to say, whatever you choose. I'm still yours. You turn back. You place the feather-shaped key on a stone pedestal that wasn't there before. The room sighs. And you step into it, not as a visitor, but as someone it now calls by name. The archive has many rooms, and they are always waiting. So if you're still awake, you might dream of one. A room that whispers. A room that breathes. A room that remembers you. And now the lights have dimmed. The echoes have stilled. The archive has gone quiet again. But it remembers. Just like your wand remembers. Just like the name you reclaimed in the wandmaker's shop. Just like the castle that once forgot you and now softly bends to make space in its walls where you belong. You came to this story nameless. Wandless. Hidden between the scenes of spells, tucked in the corners of corridors no one else could find. The world had almost erased you. But you listened. You followed the hum of a feather. You walked beneath Gringotts and stood in the room of requirement not to be sorted, but to remember. You did not ask for magic. You remembered it. And it remembered you. The wandmaker knew. The archive waited. The mirrors, the scrolls, the silent doors, all of them opened because you no longer needed to knock. You belonged there. In the circle of the unnamed. In the spaces between shelves. In the story that kept writing itself for you. You passed through dream corridors, answered spells without wands, stepped into a library where sounds curled like ink, and stood before versions of yourself that never got the chance to speak. And you said, I'm still here. And now, as the archive breathes its final page into the night, you are left with a choice, not loud, not urgent. Just quiet. Just yours. You may return to the waking world now, soft and steady, knowing that magic never left you. Or you may stay here a little longer, floating in the stillness between chapters. Because the archive never really closes. It only waits. For those who remember. Good night, Keeper. Your story is safe now. Oh, you're still awake, aren't you? You made it through the wandmaker's whispering shelves, through the archive's shifting halls, and still, here you are, eyes open, breath slow, listening. If you're still here, drop a like, let me know you're with me. I see you. Because tonight, we go deeper. Not down, exactly. Inward. There's one last door. It's not in Diagon Alley. Not beneath Gringotts. Not even hidden behind a moving bookshelf in Hogwarts. No, this one is quieter. It exists only after midnight. Only for those who remember what it feels like to be forgotten. And behind that door is a story the archive doesn't want to keep. Every time someone writes it, the ink fades. Every time someone speaks it, the words vanish in the air like steam on glass. But tonight, the story is waiting again. And it's written in a hand that looks an awful lot like yours. So lie back. Let the candlelight flicker soft against your pillow. Let the magic hush. Because this is the one story the archive can't hold on to. And tonight we're going to try. Together. You slam the book shut. Again. The ink is gone. Not smudged. Not faded. Just gone. Clean as untouched parchment, as if nothing had ever been written there at all. You open it slowly. Page 43, blank. Page 42, blank. Page 41. One word remains. Try. It's written in your handwriting. You didn't write it. You sit back, heart slow but heavy. The archive is quiet tonight. but not peacefully so. It's the kind of quiet that comes after a deep breath, just before something starts. The room around you is the same as yesterday. Candles suspended in stillness. Runes sleeping across the walls. Your chair. Your desk. The book. And the quill you enchanted yourself. The tip glows faintly, not because of charm work, but because it wants to. The quill has memory now. It has written enough of the archive's silence to understand how fragile stories can be. You dip it again. No ink needed. You write the word remember. It lasts for seconds. Then it melts. Not vanishing, melting. As if the parchment is drinking it, swallowing memory before it can anchor itself to language. You don't speak. You listen. The room is breathing differently now. The book in front of you, it isn't resisting. It's responding. You stand slowly, keeping one hand on the cover. It's warm. Not fire warm, skin warm. Like someone touched it just before you did. The archive doesn't shift. The walls don't move. But there's a feeling behind your ribs. Not fear. Not wonder. Recognition. You've seen this kind of magic before, when you first reclaimed your name. When your wand hummed without a spell. This is memory magic. The old kind. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. You try again. Once, there was a name that refused to be forgotten. You stop writing. Count the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The sentence stays. You exhale. But on the next page, without your hand moving, for words appear in silver ink. I tried to warn you. Your fingers freeze. The ink is not yours. The handwriting is not yours. But the voice behind the words is familiar, not someone you know. Someone you've been. You flip back. Page 43, still blank. Page 44 now shimmers faintly. The silver ink returns. This time, it writes. You should have let me fade. Your wand, tucked in its holster, vibrates. A low hum, almost inaudible, but constant. You are not alone in the archive tonight. You close the book, slowly, carefully. You press your palm to its cover. The hum stops. You rise. The air shifts behind you. You don't turn around, not right away. But you feel it. The room is watching you. No, not the room. Something inside it. Something that has been waiting since before your first chapter. The silence thickens. The quill dims. And your breath becomes the loudest thing in the room. The book writes one last thing, just before the page vanishes again into blankness. You lean in. 3 words. Bring the ink. Then everything fades. You are left holding the warm, blank book. And the realization that there is no ink. Not yet. You will have to find it. And this time, it won't come from a bottle. The archive has always been quiet. But tonight, it is still. Not peacefully so. Not like a room at rest. But the kind of stillness that only exists when something has entered the space and is holding its breath, waiting to be seen. You descend the spiral steps with the blank book pressed tight to your chest. It's heavier now, though the weight isn't physical. It's something else. Expectation. Tension. Recognition. The kind of weight that comes when a story begins to write itself, and you're no longer sure whether you're the author or the subject. When your feet touch the flagstone floor, the candles overhead do not flicker. They remain suspended, pale and unmoving. The shelves stretch out ahead of you, lined with unread thoughts and abandoned incantations, each one whispering faintly as you pass, too soft to be heard, but not to be felt. The magic in this part of the archive doesn't call for attention. It calls for witnesses. You walk until the shelves end. Until the walls curve inward. Until the light from your wand falls against something standing motionless at the far side of the chamber. A figure. It does not move. It does not speak. And though the archive knows your name now, etched into its ledgers, layered into its shelves, this figure does not say it. It doesn't say anything. It has no face. No cloak. No visible wand. But it feels familiar. You don't draw your wand. You don't ask a question. You simply wait. And after a long silence, the figure tilts its head slightly, not to greet you, but to study you. Then it turns. And as it steps away, you see that it leaves something behind. On the wall where it had been standing, you now see faint words written in soft, glimmering script. Not carved. Not burned. Just breathed into the stone. You move closer, and the letters sharpen. Do you know what it cost to be remembered? You reach out to touch the writing, and it vanishes before your fingers meet it. Your wand hums again. The figure is gone. But not fully. You begin to notice it now, in places it should not be. In the edge of a mirror. In the curve of a bookshelf. In the flicker of light between two rooms. Always nearby. Never whole. Back in your study chamber, the book now lies open on the desk. A single page has written itself while you were gone. This time, the handwriting is unmistakably yours. But the words are not. You read them aloud without meaning to, your voice low and steady in the candlelight. The story is starting to take things from me. You blink. And for a moment, you forget how you arrived here tonight. Not the path. Not the stairs. You forget why. You close the book with trembling hands. You speak your name aloud, softly, as if trying to anchor it again in your chest. The archive doesn't answer, but the candles begin to dim. You whisper your name again. This time it feels harder. Less certain. Like pulling thread from a tapestry that's begun to fray. You leave the study room and follow the halls deep into the oldest wing of the archive, the place where the original stories were kept, the ones not bound in books, but sealed in memory. You find a mirror covered in cloth. You remove it gently, hand shaking. Your reflection looks back at you. Familiar. Steady. But just behind your shoulder, you see it. The figure. It watches without eyes. And this time, it raises its hand, not in threat, but in offering. Its fingers are ink-stained. One by one, letters begin to appear across the glass between you. You are writing too loudly. Then, below it, the archive is beginning to forget others, to remember you. You step back. The candles flicker. And the cloth slides from your hand, curling like a shadow across the floor. You don't know what it means yet. But something is shifting. Not just in the archive. In you. The archive feels different now. Not larger, not darker, just aware. It isn't a library anymore. It's a presence. A thought stretched into rooms and shelves. And tonight, it thinks of you. You move through the corridors slowly, not because you're afraid, but because each step feels heavier than the last. The book remains tucked beneath your arm, though you haven't dared open it again. The words it speaks aren't entirely yours anymore. You can feel them trying to shape your thoughts before you've had them. And the figure, the one with no name, no face, the one leaving fingerprints of ink in every corner of the archive, it hasn't appeared again. But the silence it leaves behind echoes more loudly than footsteps. Deep in the west wing, where the air smells older and time seems uncertain, you find it. A door. Narrow. Crooked. Slightly humming. It isn't hidden, and yet you know no one else would ever find it. You reach for the knob, but there isn't one. No handle. No keyhole. Just a single phrase carved into the wood: to open me, you must let something go. You whisper a spell. The door doesn't move. You press your palm to the surface. The wood is cool, indifferent. And then, behind your eyes, something begins to turn. A memory, not large, not loud, just small and warm. A corridor at dusk. A window full of rain. The first time you whispered a spell and it whispered back. You know what the door wants. Not blood. Not sacrifice. Just a name. A story. Something real. Something you won't get back. You sit in front of the door and open the book. The pages flicker as if caught in wind, though the air is still. You turn to a blank page and write one thing. Just one. A memory of someone you haven't thought about in years. Their voice. Their laughter. A small moment between spells. You write it down. You close the book. You don't look again. The memory is gone. You know it the moment the ink sinks beneath the page. It's not lost, it's just been returned. The door creaks softly, like it's exhaling. Then it opens. Inside is a chamber shaped like a bell. Empty. Except for a stone table, and resting atop it, a page. Torn at the edges. Ink barely clinging to parchment. But you know the handwriting. It's yours. Older. Forgotten. Before the wand maker. Before the archive. Before your name was returned. The text reads, you erased yourself first. You stand very still. There is no echo in this room. No candles. No sound. Just the soft sound of a page crumbling as the ink fades once more. The door behind you remains open, but the archive is waiting. It wants to know if you're ready to stop being the keeper. If you're ready to be the story again. You do not answer aloud. But your hands begin to write. You wake in the archive. You don't remember falling asleep, or laying your head down, or when the candles dimmed, but you wake knowing something has changed. The book is open in front of you, not where you left it. The pages are moving, not turning, moving, shifting from one to the next on their own. Each line is familiar. You realize it's your voice. Not written, but heard. The pages are remembering the things you never said aloud. Each sentence curls softly along the parchment like breath across fogged glass. You try to stop reading, but the words are already there. You are walking through a corridor that didn't exist yesterday. You are holding a wand that remembers better than you do. You are becoming the memory. The archive is no longer a place you visit. It is a spell, and you are inside it. The book in front of you has no cover now, only endless white space. You press your hand to the next page and feel it respond. Your pulse, your breath, your presence. It begins to write in real time. As you think, the ink appears. You try to hold still. The book pauses. Then the candlelight flickers. A question begins to form across the center of the page, slowly, deliberately, letter by letter. Are you ready to be remembered as you truly are? Not a question with punctuation. Just a presence. A knowing. You sit with it. You breathe it in. And you begin to understand. This was never about a wand, or a name, or even the archive itself. This was about being seen. Being kept. Being carried. Your story will not be locked in a shelf, or sealed in glass, or whispered only to the wind. It will be written. Entirely. All of it. The soft parts. The fractured parts. The unfinished pieces that never made it to the sorting hat. You press your hand to the final page. Ink curls upward around your fingers, not writing, but binding. Not taking. Keeping. And just before the page darkens, you see the last line. You didn't forget. You chose to return. The book closes on its own. You stand. The archive does not shift or glow or sigh. It rests. At peace. You walk out without needing to look back. The doors will open if you ever need them. They always have. You are not the keeper now. You are the kept. A story no longer fading. A name no longer whispering. You are the ink that stayed. So, here we are. You've made it to the end. Not just of a single story, but of three. 3 journeys told softly across parchment and breath, whispered in the quiet spaces between spells, where names are remembered and forgotten and remembered again. Let's go back, just for a moment. It started with a letter. One with no name, no return address, only a shimmer in the ink and the hum of something older calling you toward a shop that didn't always exist. You walked the forgotten alley, past Ollivanders, past the parts of Diagon Alley the maps don't know, until you found it. The Wandmaker's door. You had no wand. No memory of being sorted. No house colors. No owl. No proof. But the magic remembered you. Inside that shadowed shop, lined with feathered cores and dust that moved like breath, you met the man who did not blink. He knew who you were before you remembered it yourself. You were one of the unsorted, the unwritten, a story erased before it was ever told. And in that shop, your story began to return. Piece by piece, you followed it. Through vaults beneath Gringotts, where upside-down trees whispered your name, where memories grew roots, and where a forgotten wand core waited for you to remember it. You built your wand not with spell work, but with memory. And in doing so, you stepped out of hiding and into belonging. The silent wandmaker was not your end. It was your beginning. And then came the archive. That living library beneath the room of requirement. Quiet. Watching. Full of spells never finished and names nearly lost. It called to you, not to test you, but to ask. Will you remember what others chose to forget? You walked its winding shelves. You discovered the mirror that showed you not your desires, but your echoes. Versions of yourself that might have been. You followed keys made of feathers and unlocked rooms that responded only to your breath. You learned magic that didn't need wands. Magic that lived in silence and sacrifice. The archive taught you how to be more than a name. It asked you to choose. And you stayed. You became the keeper. Not of books, but of memory. Of unspoken things. You walked between ink and echo, carried stories no one else could hold. The archive opened for you because you didn't try to command it. You listened. But the story didn't end there. No, you didn't fall asleep. You stayed. So the archive opened one final time. You didn't fall asleep. So the archive opened one last door. And behind it, there was no spellbook. No sorting hat. No flame-lit corridor. Just a blank page, waiting. You tried to write your story. But the ink wouldn't stay. Every memory you etched onto the page vanished as soon as it was spoken. Every word dissolved back into silence. And slowly, you began to understand, this story wasn't resisting you. It was testing you. Because some magic only becomes real when you fight to keep it. You met the figure without a name. A presence in the archive that left no sound, only echoes. Every time it appeared, more of your memories grew quiet. Not erased. Just distant. You remembered the cost of being remembered. You felt the archive bend, then blur, then hold you in place between page and dream. And when it asked you to sacrifice a memory, to give something up, to let it go forever, you didn't hesitate. You gave it freely. You gave it to the door with no handle. You chose to forget something real in order to pass through. That's how you found the truth. The archive didn't keep you. You kept it. With every name you reclaimed, every spell you remembered, every silence you dared to step into, you shaped the archive. You gave it form. You became more than a keeper. You became the ink that stayed. And now, the story is written. The feather found. The echo answered. The name remembered. And still, here you are. Awake. Listening. Carrying something you didn't have when we began. Not just a wand. Not just a memory. But a sense of belonging. You are part of the magic now. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you remembered where it was hiding. Inside you. So if you're still here, still listening, still awake after all this time, leave a like to let the archive know you're with us. Subscribe if you want to return. The door may be closed for now, but like all good stories, it will open again when it's needed most.